Max sat at his desk, staring blankly at the paper in front of him. The words blurred together as he tried to focus, but no matter how hard he tried, nothing seemed to make sense. He could hear the muffled voices of his classmates, the low murmur of their conversations, but one voice cut through the noise, sharp and unmistakable. "Hey, Max. How's it feel to be the dumbest kid in class?" Max's heart sank. It was Jake, the biggest bully in school, and his friends were laughing along with him. Max's cheeks burned as he slouched lower in his seat, wishing the floor would just swallow him up. He hated this. The taunting, the whispers, the snickers whenever he said something wrong or made a mistake. It had become his everyday reality. "Come on, Max. I know you don't get math, but you could at least try." Jake's voice echoed in the classroom. Max clenched his fists, but he didn't respond. He didn't know what to say anymore. He had tried, day after day, but the harder he worked, the further behind he seemed to fall. His grades were always the lowest in the class. His teachers, though kind, just told him to keep trying harder, but no matter how much he pushed himself, it never felt like enough. "Yeah, Max is such a joke," one of Jake's friends chimed in. Max looked around at the faces of the other students. Some were too busy to notice, some were pretending not to hear, and a few, like Sarah, the girl he had a crush on, simply looked away. It stung. The silence from his peers only made the laughter louder, like a cruel reminder that he didn't belong here, didn't belong in this world of sharp minds and quick wit. He wasn't smart enough. He wasn't good enough. Suddenly, the bell rang, signaling the end of class. The students gathered their things, chatting and laughing as they filed out of the room. Max was the last to leave, always the last. He moved slowly, his backpack heavy on his shoulders, and tried not to look at the group of kids near the door who were still talking about him. As he walked down the hallway toward the exit, he passed a poster on the wall. It was an advertisement for a local science fair. "Prove your genius. Show the world what you're made of," it read in bold letters. Max's eyes lingered on the poster for a moment, his mind swirling with frustration and longing. A part of him wanted to believe that he could do it. That maybe, just maybe, he could finally prove everyone wrong. But another part of him, the part that had been beaten down by years of bullying and self-doubt, knew it was a pipe dream. He wasn't smart enough. Not like them. Not like anyone. He reached the school's front door and stepped outside, the cool air hitting his face. He wanted to feel better, wanted to feel anything other than the deep ache in his chest. He just wanted it all to stop. The bullying, the whispers, the feeling of being invisible. Suddenly, his phone buzzed in his pocket. Max pulled it out, hoping for something, anything to distract him from his thoughts. It was a message from his mom. She wanted him to come straight home after school today. She was busy with work, and Max wasn't sure if it was a good or bad thing that she wanted him out of the house. Max tapped on the message, sending a quick reply. "Okay, Mom. See you soon." He didn't feel like going home, but there was nowhere else to go. As he started to walk, his mind wandered back to the cruel words of his classmates. "You're dumb. You'll never amount to anything. Just give up." He heard those words in his head every day, but today they felt louder, like they were trying to drown him. That's when Max had the thought, the one he never imagined would cross his mind. What if I could prove them wrong? It wasn't just wishful thinking. This time, it felt different. He was tired of being the joke, tired of being invisible. He needed to find a way to rise above. Max had heard about Elon Musk, the tech mogul who had changed the world. Musk wasn't some genius born into wealth. He had struggled. He had been doubted. But now he was a billionaire, admired by millions. Max thought about that for a moment, the thought igniting something inside him. What if I could be like Elon Musk? What if he could go from being the kid everyone called dumb to someone who could make a difference? Max stopped walking. He pulled out his phone again, searching for any information he could find on Elon Musk. He wasn't sure where this new idea had come from, but for the first time in a long while, something in his chest felt hopeful. Maybe this was the way out. Maybe this was the way to show everyone that he was more than they thought. Max glanced at the sky, the sun setting in the distance. It was going to be a long road, but maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something. Something big. Max sat in his small bedroom, the walls covered with posters of rockets, spaceships, and tech innovations. His room was his sanctuary, the one place where he could escape the harsh reality of school and his life at home. He often retreated here when the world outside seemed too overwhelming, as if the posters could somehow shield him from the pain of being labeled the dumb kid. His parents had separated a year ago. The divorce was messy, full of shouting matches and awkward silences. Max had always been the quiet, shy one in the family. He never had the words to say when things went wrong, and his parents never seemed to have the time to listen anyway. His mom, a nurse, was always working long hours to make ends meet. His dad had moved out of state, leaving Max with a sense of abandonment that he couldn't shake. At school, things weren't much better. Max wasn't exactly a troublemaker, but he wasn't a star student either. His classmates noticed this early on, and it didn't take long for the teasing to start. Max couldn't understand why he found things like math and science so difficult. The numbers on the page would twist into a blur, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't make sense of it. His teachers weren't unkind, but they seemed to be growing more and more frustrated with his struggles. "You need to focus more, Max," they would say, their patience wearing thin. The teasing became more intense when Max was in middle school. The kids had learned that if they could get under his skin, they would get a reaction. Max had tried to ignore them, but it was hard to ignore the words that cut so deep. "Max is such a loser. Why does he even bother showing up?" one kid would say as others snickered. "You're the dumbest kid in class, aren't you?" Jake would say, his voice dripping with contempt. Max couldn't stand the way Jake's words felt like daggers. But the worst part wasn't just the teasing. It was the feeling that no matter how hard he worked, he was always a step behind everyone else. It seemed like his classmates got things instantly, while Max had to try twice as hard just to keep up. Every failed test felt like a public declaration that he wasn't good enough. The pressure to succeed was overwhelming, but no matter how much he studied, the answers still evaded him. Max would come home from school every day, his shoulders slumped, his spirit drained. He would sit at the kitchen table, trying to study, but the words and equations seemed meaningless. His mom would tell him to keep trying, but she was always so tired. She would look at him with pity in her eyes, and Max hated it. He hated the way she seemed to blame herself for his failures. "Max, you can do better. You just need to focus," she would say, her voice gentle but firm. But Max wasn't sure if he could anymore. He had tried so many times, and every attempt seemed to end in failure. He often wondered why he wasn't like the other kids, why he couldn't just get it the way they did. Why was it so hard for him to learn? It wasn't like he didn't care. He cared more than anyone realized. But no matter how hard he tried, the feeling of being dumb haunted him. His classmates didn't help. They saw him as the kid who would never amount to anything. Jake and his friends made sure of that, always making jokes at his expense, always reminding him of how much better everyone else was. Every time they laughed, Max felt like the world was laughing at him too. But deep down, Max knew something they didn't. There was a part of him that refused to give up, no matter how bad things got. Every time they called him dumb, there was a flicker of defiance inside him. He wasn't stupid. He just needed to find a way to prove it. The idea of Elon Musk, the tech genius who had overcome so many obstacles, began to take hold in Max's mind. If Musk could go from struggling to succeeding, maybe there was hope for him too. Maybe all of his struggles weren't for nothing. Maybe he could rise above the bullying and the labels and show everyone that he was more than just the kid they had written off. Max's mom, though well-meaning, didn't understand his obsession with Elon Musk. She didn't understand why Max would spend hours watching Musk's interviews and reading about his companies. But to Max, Musk wasn't just a billionaire. He was proof that anything was possible. If Musk could build rockets and run multiple companies, maybe Max could find his own path, even if it wasn't in math or science. Maybe there was something else he was good at, something he hadn't discovered yet. "Max, you need to focus on your studies, not these far-off dreams," his mom would say, shaking her head as she came into his room. "I know, Mom," Max would reply, his mind still buzzing with ideas. But in the quiet of his room, Max couldn't help but wonder, what if I could be like him? What if I could be something more than what they think I am? As he sat in his room, staring at the poster of a rocket launch on his wall, Max made a decision. He wasn't going to let the bullies, or his failures define him. He was going to find a way to prove everyone wrong. He was going to find his own path, just like Elon Musk did. He wasn't sure how he was going to do it, but for the first time in a long time, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. Max woke up early the next morning, his mind buzzing with thoughts of the future. It was still dark outside, the sky just beginning to show the first hints of dawn. He had always been more of a night owl, often staying up late in his room, reading about Elon Musk or watching videos about SpaceX and Tesla. But today felt different. There was a sense of urgency in the air. Max had made up his mind. He was going to prove himself, not just to his classmates, but to the whole world. After quickly getting ready, he grabbed his backpack and headed to school. He had decided to take a different route today. Instead of slumping into his seat at the back of the classroom, as he always did, he walked with purpose. He wasn't sure what he was going to do yet, but he was going to make an impact. As Max entered the classroom, he noticed Jake and his friends laughing loudly, as usual. They hadn't seen him yet, and for a brief moment, Max wondered if he could just slip by unnoticed. But then he reminded himself that he was done with hiding. He had a plan, and nothing was going to stop him. "Hey, Max. What's up? Forgot your brain at home today?" Jake's voice sliced through the air like a knife. The laughter from Jake and his friends followed, but Max didn't flinch. Instead, he stood up straighter, walked to his desk, and sat down, trying to ignore the jeers. Jake wasn't going to let it go. "Oh, I see. Max is too good for us now. Too busy dreaming about rockets and stuff. Huh? You're still the same idiot, no matter how hard you try." Max's heart pounded in his chest, but he refused to let Jake see how much his words stung. The other kids in the class were watching now, some smirking, some looking uncomfortable. But Max didn't care. Not anymore. He wasn't going to be anyone's punchline any longer. He turned to the teacher, Mr. McAllister, who was getting ready to start the lesson. "Mr. McAllister," Max said, his voice firm, "I have a question." The class went quiet, all eyes on him. Jake raised an eyebrow, looking skeptical. "Oh, look at this. Max has a question. Let's all listen to the genius." Ignoring Jake's mockery, Max continued, "Is there any way I can enter the science fair? I know it's not the usual thing, but I really want to try something. I want to work on something big, something different." Mr. McAllister looked at Max, surprised. "The science fair is for advanced projects, Max. Are you sure about this?" Max nodded, determined. "Yes, I'm sure. I have an idea. I just need the chance to try." Mr. McAllister hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "All right, Max. I'll let you try, but you'll have to meet certain standards. It's a lot of work, and it won't be easy." The class murmured, and Max could feel the weight of their judgment. They didn't believe in him. He could see it in their eyes, the doubt, the disbelief. They all thought he was the dumb kid. But Max was determined to prove them wrong. After class, Max walked to his locker, his mind racing. He had no idea how he was going to come up with a project that would impress the judges, let alone his classmates, but the idea of the science fair was all he could think about. He knew he had to start somewhere, and he had to do it fast. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and he pulled it out. It was a message from his mom. "Max, I need you to help me with something after school today. Please." Max sighed. He had hoped to get a head start on his project, but it seemed like his mom needed him. She'd been working late a lot lately, and he hated leaving her to handle everything on her own. But this was his chance. The science fair was his shot at showing everyone, including his mom, that he wasn't just a lost cause. He walked to the cafeteria, grabbing his lunch, when he saw Jake and his friends sitting at their usual table. They all looked at him as he walked by. "Oh, look at that. Max is trying to be a scientist now," Jake said, loud enough for the whole cafeteria to hear. Max felt his face flush, but he didn't turn around. He didn't need to. They could laugh all they wanted. It wasn't going to stop him. As he sat down at a different table, trying to tune out Jake's taunts, Max's mind kept returning to Elon Musk. Musk had faced so many challenges in his life. He wasn't born into wealth or privilege. He had been bullied, ridiculed, and rejected. But he had kept going, pushing through every obstacle to create companies that changed the world. If Elon Musk could do it, maybe Max could too. The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch, and Max got up, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. He didn't know what his project would be yet, but he knew one thing. He wasn't going to let Jake or anyone else stop him. It was time to stop being the kid who was always laughed at. It was time to start proving them all wrong. Max's heart raced as he entered the school's science lab the next day. He had spent hours researching, watching videos, and scribbling down ideas for his project. The world of science was vast, and while Max wasn't sure exactly what to do, he knew that he needed to push himself further than he ever had before. This wasn't just about winning the science fair. It was about proving to everyone, including himself, that he wasn't the dumb kid anymore. He had spent the last week coming up with ideas. At first, it was just about testing different things: physics, chemistry, maybe even engineering. But nothing felt right. Everything seemed too complicated, too far beyond his reach. Max needed a breakthrough. He needed something simple but innovative, something that would make the judges take notice. That afternoon, he had his breakthrough. While watching a SpaceX documentary about Musk's work with electric cars, Max's thoughts turned to sustainability. Musk had dedicated his life to developing technologies that would help save the planet. Electric cars, solar power, even sending humans to Mars. It was all connected by one big idea. The future of the world needed innovation. And Max realized that he, too, could be part of that. What if I create something to help with clean energy? Max whispered to himself. A renewable energy device that's affordable and easy to build. His idea was simple: a small solar-powered device that could charge electronic devices. It wasn't the kind of breakthrough that would change the world overnight, but it was practical, and it had potential. Max could make it on his own, and it would show the judges that he wasn't afraid to tackle big issues, even if he was just a kid. The next day, Max began gathering materials. He didn't have much money, so he had to be creative. He scavenged old electronics, bought a cheap solar panel kit from the hardware store, and gathered other materials from the local recycling center. Max spent hours in his room, soldering wires and piecing together his device. His mind focused entirely on the project. The teasing from Jake and his friends continued, but it didn't matter as much anymore. Max had something to prove. The taunts from Jake, who now called him the mad scientist, were just noise in the background. Max had a goal, and nothing was going to distract him. By the time the science fair arrived, Max's solar-powered device was ready. It wasn't perfect. There were still a few bugs to work out, but it worked. The device could charge a phone using solar energy, and it was portable. Max had done it. He had built something that could potentially change the way people used energy in their everyday lives. And for the first time in a long time, Max felt proud of what he had accomplished. The science fair was held in the school gymnasium. Max stood nervously beside his project, glancing around at the other students' displays. There were some impressive projects: robotic arms, complicated chemical reactions, even a working model of the human brain. It was intimidating, but Max didn't let it scare him. He reminded himself that he wasn't here to compete with them. He was here to prove something to himself. As the judges made their way down the aisles, Max's heart beat faster. They stopped at his table, their eyes scanning the project. One of them, a woman with short, dark hair, raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" she asked, leaning closer. "It's a solar-powered charger," Max explained, his voice shaking slightly. "It's designed to be portable and affordable. It can charge any small electronic device just by using solar energy." The judges exchanged looks, clearly intrigued. "That's an interesting idea," the man next to the woman said. "How does it work?" Max explained how the solar panel absorbed sunlight, which was then converted into electricity to charge the device. He showed them how it charged his phone, and the judges nodded, impressed. "Very resourceful," the woman said. "But tell us, why did you choose this particular project?" Max took a deep breath. This was the moment he had been waiting for. "I wanted to create something that could help people, something that could make a difference in the world. I've been thinking a lot about how we can use energy more efficiently. It's a big problem, and even though this is just a small step, I wanted to try." The judges seemed to appreciate his answer, and after a few more questions, they moved on to the next project. Max stood there, his mind racing. It hadn't been perfect, but he felt something that he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. For the first time in his life, He had done something that felt important, and it felt like a huge step toward proving to everyone, especially himself, that he wasn't the kid everyone thought he was. As the science fair wrapped up, Max didn't know whether or not he would win. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that he had completed the project, and for the first time, he felt like he was worthy of respect. He wasn't just the dumb kid anymore. He was Max, a kid who had an idea and saw it through. He had earned his place, and no one could take that away from him. Later that afternoon, as Max walked out of the gym with his mom, who had come to support him, he could feel the weight of his journey behind him. The teasing, the doubts, the fears, they were all still there, but they didn't control him anymore. Max had proven to himself that he was capable of so much more than anyone had ever thought. He wasn't done yet. The science fair was just the beginning. Max had bigger dreams now, and with Elon Musk as his inspiration, he knew that nothing was impossible. Max's heart was pounding as he walked out of the gym, feeling the weight of what he had just done. The science fair was over, but for Max, the journey was just beginning. He had shown up, built something from scratch, and given it his all. But now came the part he dreaded most, the moment of judgment. Had he really done enough? Would anyone, even the judges, believe in him? Max's mom, who had been there all afternoon, put a reassuring hand on his shoulder as they walked to the parking lot. "I'm really proud of you, Max," she said softly. "It takes a lot of courage to stand up and show what you can do, especially when others doubt you." Max smiled weakly but said nothing. He appreciated his mom's support, but he couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty gnawing at him. The judges had seemed interested, but did that mean his project was actually good? Or had they been impressed by his enthusiasm and not the quality of the work itself? As they drove home, Max's mind continued to race. Every little thing about the project replayed in his mind. The design, the flaws, the moments when he had nearly given up. He had wanted to do something big, to change the world. But what if he had just built another piece of junk? What if his classmates and everyone else were right, and he was just a stupid kid who had no business trying to do anything meaningful? The next morning, Max received an unexpected text. It was from his science teacher, Mr. McAllister. "Max, could you come to my office after school today? I need to talk to you about your science fair project." Max's stomach dropped. His first thought was that something had gone wrong. Maybe the judges hadn't liked the project, and now Mr. McAllister was going to tell him he hadn't made the cut. But then he remembered something. Mr. McAllister had been one of the only teachers who hadn't doubted him, the only one who had given him a shot in the first place. The whole day passed in a blur for Max. He could barely concentrate in class, his thoughts constantly drifting to the meeting later. By the time the bell rang, signaling the end of school, his nerves were shot. He gathered his things and walked to Mr. McAllister's office, trying to shake off the feeling of dread that had settled in his chest. When Max entered the office, Mr. McAllister was standing by the window, looking out at the school courtyard. He turned as Max stepped in, a slight smile on his face. "Max," he said warmly, "I wanted to talk to you about your project." Max swallowed, his palms sweating. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked nervously. Mr. McAllister shook his head. No, it's not that at all. Actually, I'm impressed with your project. You've done something that I didn't expect from you. You've taken an idea and made it into something real, something that actually works." Max blinked, confused. "Really? You liked it?" Mr. McAllister chuckled. "Yes, but that's not all." He paused, looking at Max seriously now. "I've been in contact with a few people who are interested in the science fair projects this year. There's a company, a small startup, working on sustainable energy solutions. They've been looking for innovative ideas, and your solar charger caught their attention." Max's jaw dropped. He could hardly believe what he was hearing. "Wait, what?" The teacher smiled again. "They want to meet you. They think your idea could be the start of something big. They're interested in helping you develop it further." Max couldn't speak for a moment. His mind was spinning. He had dreamed of moments like this, but it had never seemed like something that could actually happen to him. Was this real? "I've set up a meeting with him for tomorrow," Mr. McAllister continued. "I'll go with you if you need support, but this is your moment, Max. You've got a real chance to take this project to the next level." Max felt his heart race. He was overwhelmed, unsure of what to say. He had always dreamed of having a chance like this, an opportunity to do something important, but now that it was right in front of him, he wasn't sure he was ready. "But I'm just a kid," Max said quietly. "I mean, this is huge. How could I possibly do this?" Mr. McAllister looked at him with a serious expression. "You're not just a kid, Max. You're a kid with a vision. You've already proven that you can think outside the box and bring something to life. You don't need to be anything else. Just take the chance." Max's mind was racing as he left the office, barely able to process what had just happened. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for. A real opportunity, a real shot at changing the world. And it was all happening because he had dared to try. Walking home that day, Max felt a sense of clarity he hadn't felt in a long time. He wasn't just proving something to the kids at school or to Jake anymore. This was about proving to himself that he had what it took. He had taken a chance, and it had paid off. Max wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, he believed it could be something amazing. It wasn't just about the science fair or winning a prize. It was about the journey, the discovery, and the belief that he could do something that mattered. And for the first time in his life, Max felt like he was on the path to something big, something that would change everything. Max sat at the kitchen table, his mom beside him, both of them staring at the email that had arrived just minutes ago. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure whether to click reply or let the moment pass. The email was from the small startup company that Mr. McAllister had connected him with, a company focused on renewable energy and sustainable solutions. They were offering him the opportunity to collaborate with their engineers and scientists, giving him the chance to bring his solar-powered charger idea to life. To any adult, it would have been a dream come true, but for Max, it was almost too overwhelming to process. "What do you think, Mom?" he asked, his voice trembling with a mix of excitement and doubt. His mom smiled at him, her eyes shining with pride. "I think this is everything you've been working for, Max. It's a chance to make a difference, but it's also okay to feel nervous. This is a big step, but it's yours to take." Max stared at the screen, feeling the weight of the decision in his chest. He had spent his whole life feeling like an outsider, like the kid no one took seriously. But now, with an opportunity this big, he realized something that hit him hard. He had a choice. He could take a chance, embrace the possibility of failure and success, or he could walk away, keeping the safety of his comfort zone but also giving up on the chance to make his dream come true. He clicked reply. The next few days passed in a blur. Max spent hours researching, reading articles about solar energy, speaking with Mr. McAllister, and learning everything he could about the startup. They wanted to meet in person, to see if his idea was feasible, and to figure out how they could help him refine it. This was his moment to prove himself. When Max arrived at the meeting with Mr. McAllister, he was shaking with nerves. The company's office was sleek and modern, filled with white walls and clean lines, a space that felt worlds apart from his own cluttered room. They were about to meet some of the top engineers and investors in the field. As they sat down in a sleek conference room, the representatives from the company introduced themselves. There was Ben, the head engineer, who had been working on solar panels for years, Rachel, the product manager, who had worked on a number of clean energy projects, and Steve, the CEO, who seemed to radiate confidence. Max was in awe of them. They were professionals, people who had made their careers out of the very thing he had just stumbled upon. Ben was the first to speak. "Max, we've looked at your project, and we have to say, we're impressed. You've made something that's both innovative and practical. It shows a lot of potential, but we need to understand more about your vision. What do you want to achieve with this?" Max took a deep breath. This was the moment he had been preparing for. He wasn't just talking about a school project anymore. He was talking about his future. "I want to create a product that people can use, not just in their homes, but everywhere. Outdoors, on the go, in places where power sources are limited. My idea is to make renewable energy accessible, to give people an easy, affordable way to power their devices with solar energy." The team exchanged looks, nodding in approval. Rachel smiled. "That's exactly what we need. A product that can make clean energy more personal, more accessible." Steve leaned forward. "Max, we think you've got the right mindset. We'd like to help you turn this idea into something bigger. We'll provide you with resources, engineering support, prototyping, even funding. but it's going to take a lot of work. It's not going to be easy. Max felt a rush of adrenaline. This was it. This was what he had worked for. And it wasn't just about the technology, it was about the journey. The journey that started with a bullied kid who thought he wasn't good enough. The journey that led him to this room, sitting with some of the most influential people in the field. "We'll help you," Ben said. "But we want to know, are you ready for this?" Max looked at the team, his heart racing, and then, without hesitation, he nodded. "I'm ready." The meeting ended with handshakes and promises to follow up. As Max and Mr. McAllister walked out of the building, Max couldn't stop smiling. It wasn't just a dream anymore. It was happening. That evening, as Max sat at his desk, looking over his notes and drawings for the solar charger, he realized something. This wasn't just about the project. It wasn't even about the opportunity. It was about everything he had learned along the way. The resilience, the belief in himself, the hard work, and the courage to take risks. Max wasn't the same person who had walked into that science fair. He had grown, not just as a student, but as someone who could change the world. The bullies, the doubts, the fears, they were still there, but they no longer defined him. He had a vision now, and that vision was bigger than any of the obstacles that had once held him back. As he sat back in his chair, Max felt a sense of calm wash over him. He was ready. Whatever came next, he knew that he was capable. He had proven it to himself, and now he was going to prove it to the world. The following weeks were a whirlwind for Max. The startup had kept their word. They provided resources, funding, and a team of engineers who worked with him to refine his solar charger. Max spent hours in the lab, tweaking designs, running tests, and learning from experts in the field. But as much as he was growing, there was something that gnawed at him, something that made him question if he was truly ready for what was happening. It wasn't the work itself, it was the pressure. Max had always been the quiet, underestimated kid. Now, he was working on something that could change the world. But with that came expectations, and with expectations came fear. What if he couldn't live up to them? What if he failed? Max was at his desk one evening, looking over some of the results from the latest prototype tests, when he received a phone call. It was an unknown number, and he almost didn't answer. But something told him to pick up. "Hello?" Max answered, trying to keep his voice steady. "Max?" The voice on the other end was familiar, but Max couldn't quite place it at first. "This is Elon Musk," the voice said. "I've been following your project for a while, and I have to say, I'm impressed." Max's heart skipped a beat. "Elon Musk? The Elon Musk?" "The one and only," Elon replied with a chuckle. "I've been watching your work closely. You've got a lot of potential, Max. But I've got a proposal for you." Max's mind was reeling. Elon Musk, the guy who had revolutionized electric cars and space travel, was calling him? It didn't seem real. "I'm listening," Max said, trying to keep his cool. "I've been thinking about how we can make solar energy more accessible and efficient, and your project fits right into that vision. I want to meet you in person. I think we could work together to make this even bigger. But here's the catch. I'm offering you a chance to join my team. I can help you take this idea to the next level, but you'll have to move to California. Leave everything behind and commit to the project full-time." Max's heart was pounding. A chance to work with Elon Musk? To take his project to the next level? But there was so much at stake. He had just started with the startup, and things were beginning to move in the right direction. Could he really walk away from it all? Before he could say anything, Elon continued, "I know this is a huge decision, Max. It's not easy. But think about it. This could be your chance to change the world, to build something that lasts." Max sat back in his chair, his mind spinning. Everything he had worked for, everything he had believed in, was suddenly in front of him. The opportunity to work with the most innovative mind of his generation was right there. But could he walk away from what he had already started? Would leaving the startup mean giving up on something that had the potential to grow into something just as big? The more Max thought about it, the more he realized that this was bigger than just the project. This was about the direction his life was heading in, and whether he was ready to fully embrace it. It wasn't just about making the right choice. It was about whether he believed in himself enough to take a leap into the unknown. Max took a deep breath. "I need some time to think," he said. "This is a big decision." "Of course," Elon said. Take your time. But know that this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If you decide to move forward, I'll be there to help you every step of the way." The call ended, and Max sat in stunned silence for a few moments, processing everything he had just heard. His dream had always been to make a difference, to change the world. But now, with this new offer on the table, he was faced with the hardest decision of his life. His mind kept going back to the science fair, to the bullying, to the moments when he had felt like giving up. Max had come so far. He had proven that he wasn't just a kid who was dumb or wasting his time. He was capable, and now the whole world was starting to see it. But was he ready to take that next step? Could he handle the pressure of being in the spotlight, working with some of the most influential people in the world? Max looked at the drawings on his desk, the prototypes, the sketches that had started this journey. They were no longer just paper and ink. They were the foundation of something bigger. He had already taken so many risks to get to this point. Was this the next step? Or would he be jumping into something too big for him to handle? Max stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the world below. He had spent so much time thinking about what was possible, but now it was time to think about what was right for him. It wasn't just about the opportunity. It was about believing in himself enough to take it, even if it scared him. The decision wasn't going to be easy. But Max knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to let fear stand in his way. The decision hung over Max like a thick fog, clouding his every thought. It had been days since Elon Musk's call, but every time Max tried to focus on his project, the weight of that offer pulled at him. He couldn't escape it. The chance to work with Elon was the kind of opportunity that didn't come around twice in a lifetime, but it also meant leaving behind everything he had worked so hard to build. Sitting in his room, Max stared at his desk, the sketches and blueprints scattered across the surface. They were no longer just dreams. They were real. He had already made significant strides with the startup, and things were starting to move in the right direction. Yet, working with Elon Musk meant a different kind of future, one that was uncertain, thrilling, and terrifying all at once. Max's phone buzzed, breaking his thoughts. It was a text from Mr. McAllister, the mentor who had become his guide through this whirlwind journey. "Max, I know you're probably feeling overwhelmed right now, but I want to remind you of something important. You don't have to make this decision alone. If you ever need to talk or need advice, I'm here." Max sat back and read the text again. Mr. McAllister had been a constant presence throughout his journey, encouraging him when others doubted and pushing him to be better when he questioned himself. But now, Max needed more than encouragement. He needed to figure out what truly mattered. The truth was, Max was scared. He wasn't afraid of the challenge or the work. He was afraid of failure. He had spent years in the shadow of others, trying to prove that he was capable. Now that he was on the cusp of something big, the fear of messing it all up threatened to paralyze him. Max decided to reach out to Mr. McAllister. He picked up his phone and sent a quick message. "Can we talk? I need some advice." A few minutes later, Mr. McAllister called. "What's on your mind, Max?" Max exhaled, his heart racing. "I don't know what to do. Elon Musk wants me to join his team, but I've already started working with the startup, and I don't want to leave them behind. I feel like I'm about to make the wrong choice no matter what I do." Mr. McAllister was quiet for a moment. "It's a tough decision, Max. But here's the thing. No matter which path you choose, it's your journey. You've already proven that you have the passion, the drive, and the creativity to make things happen. Whether you're with Elon or with the startup, it's not about the opportunity itself. It's about what you're going to do with it." Max nodded, even though Mr. McAllister couldn't see him. He knew that the mentor's words were true. He had always been afraid of failure, but what if the real failure was in not taking a risk? What if the biggest mistake he could make was not trusting himself enough to take the leap? "I don't know if I can do this," Max admitted. "I'm just scared." "That's okay," Mr. McAllister said gently. "Everyone is scared at some point. The key is to use that fear as fuel. If you're scared, it means you care. And if you care, you'll work harder to succeed. Whatever you choose, you have to be willing to commit to it, wholeheartedly." Max took a deep breath. It wasn't about being fearless. It was about moving forward despite the fear. "Thanks, Mr. McAllister," Max said. "I think I know what I need to do." The next morning, Max woke up early, feeling the weight of his decision still heavy on his chest. But something had changed. He wasn't just scared anymore. He was motivated. He had spent too long doubting himself, listening to the voices that told him he wasn't enough. Now, he had the chance to prove them all wrong. It wasn't about the opportunity to work with Elon Musk, though that was part of it. It was about proving to himself that he could make a difference. Max picked up his phone and opened the email from Elon Musk. He hesitated for a moment, staring at the screen, but then he typed his response. "Thank you for the offer, Mr. Musk. After a lot of thought, I've decided to stay with the startup. I'm passionate about what we're building here, and I believe this is where I can make the most impact, for now. I hope we can work together in the future." He hit send. Max sat back in his chair, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. It wasn't the easiest decision, but it was the right one for him. He was ready to commit to the project he had already started, to make it something bigger, something that mattered. Later that day, Max received a reply from Elon Musk. "I respect your decision, Max. You've got a strong vision, and I'm excited to see where it takes you. Keep in touch, and I look forward to seeing what you accomplish. Best of luck." Max smiled, feeling a sense of closure. It wasn't the end of his journey. It was just the beginning. He had chosen his path, and now it was time to walk it. Max's decision to stay with the startup was met with mixed reactions. The team at the startup was thrilled. He was committed, and they knew that his passion and creativity would continue to push the project forward. But for Max, the decision didn't come without its own set of challenges. There was still the fear that he had missed out on something extraordinary by turning down Elon Musk's offer. Despite the lingering doubt, Max threw himself into his work. He had a clear vision now, to take his solar charger concept and make it something that could truly impact the world. The startup was small, but it was growing, and Max was determined to help it thrive. The first challenge was refining the prototype. The previous version had been a great proof of concept, but it wasn't ready for mass production. There were still issues with efficiency, and the design needed to be streamlined. Max spent sleepless nights working alongside engineers, testing different materials, and conducting endless trials. Every time a new prototype failed, it felt like a setback. But Max had learned from his mistakes. Each failure taught him something new. In the midst of the stress and exhaustion, Max found a small, encouraging victory. After one particularly long day of testing, he received an email from a major renewable energy conference. They had seen his project and wanted to invite him to present his work at the event. The conference was an incredible opportunity. Thousands of industry leaders, potential investors, and experts from around the world would be in attendance. Max felt a surge of excitement. This was the break he had been waiting for, the chance to showcase his work on a global stage. But there was also the pressure. His prototype wasn't perfect, and he wasn't sure it would be ready in time. The clock was ticking. He gathered the team together for a brainstorming session. "We have one shot at this," Max said, his voice steady despite the anxiety building inside him. "This could be the moment that changes everything. We need to make sure we're ready." The team rallied around him. Engineers worked around the clock to fine-tune the technology, while the marketing team put together a compelling presentation that would showcase the innovation and potential of the solar charger. Max spent hours rehearsing his pitch, making sure every word was perfect, every detail accounted for. As the day of the conference approached, Max couldn't shake the feeling of doubt that crept into his mind. Was the charger ready? Would the industry experts be impressed? Or would they see it as just another failed attempt? The pressure was mounting, but Max knew he couldn't let fear hold him back. The night before the conference, Max stood alone in the office, looking over the final version of his presentation. The prototype was sitting on the table in front of him, sleek and functional. He ran his fingers over the surface, feeling the weight of it. This was it. This was his dream, his work, his future. He took a deep breath and muttered to himself, "No turning back now." The conference was held at a massive convention center, and as Max stepped into the lobby, he was struck by the scale of it all. Thousands of people milled about, discussing the latest trends in renewable energy, new innovations, and the future of the industry. Max felt like a small fish in an ocean of giants. His nerves threatened to overwhelm him, but he pushed them aside. This was his chance to prove himself. When it was finally time for Max's presentation, He walked onto the stage, his heart racing. The room was packed, and hundreds of eyes were trained on him. As he began to speak, the initial nerves faded away, replaced by a sense of purpose. He talked about the solar charger, the science behind it, and the potential it had to change the world. He didn't just talk about the product. He talked about the vision behind it, the future he wanted to help create. The response was overwhelming. People were intrigued, impressed by the design and the ambition behind it. Investors approached him afterward, eager to learn more. The validation he had been searching for was right in front of him. He had done it. But just as Max was starting to feel like he had achieved something monumental, he was approached by a familiar face. It was Mr. McAllister, his mentor. "You did it, Max," Mr. McAllister said, clapping him on the back. "I knew you had it in you." Max smiled, but there was a part of him that still felt unsure. "I'm not there yet," he admitted. "This is just the beginning. I still have a lot of work to do." "You're right," Mr. McAllister agreed. "But this is a big step. You've proven yourself to the world, and more importantly, to yourself." Max took a deep breath. The journey had only just begun, and there was still so much to be done. But in that moment, surrounded by industry leaders and investors who believed in him, Max felt a spark of hope ignite within him. He wasn't just the kid who had been bullied. He was Max, the innovator, the visionary, and now, he was starting to see his dreams come to life. Max's presentation at the conference had been a resounding success. The solar charger project was generating buzz, and he was now on the radar of some of the biggest names in the industry. Investors were showing interest, and the startup's future seemed brighter than ever. But as Max soon learned, success came with its own set of challenges, ones that would test him in ways he had never anticipated. In the weeks following the conference, Max was bombarded with emails, meeting requests, and messages from interested parties. Everyone wanted a piece of his vision. Some were eager to offer investment, while others wanted to partner up, providing resources or expertise. It was overwhelming, but exhilarating at the same time. Max couldn't help but feel like he was finally living the dream. However, with so much attention came a new level of responsibility. The startup, which had once been a small team of passionate individuals, was now growing rapidly. The pressure to deliver was intensifying. Max had to ensure that the prototype was refined and ready for production, while simultaneously managing the expanding team and making key business decisions. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of back-to-back meetings, Max sat alone in his office, staring at the stacks of paperwork on his desk. His mind raced with ideas and to-do lists, but something didn't feel right. He had come so far, but was this really what he wanted? Was he ready to take on the pressure of running a company that could change the world? Just as he was about to lose himself in his thoughts, his phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize, but something told him it was important. "Hello? Max, it's Elon Musk." Max's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't heard from Elon since he turned down the offer to join his team. Had something changed? Was this the moment Elon was going to offer him a second chance? "I know it's been a while," Elon continued. "I've been following your progress, and I'm impressed by what you've accomplished with the solar charger. I think we could do something really powerful together." Max's mind raced. The opportunity he had turned down was now coming back to him, but this time, it felt different. He wasn't sure what to say. On one hand, he was more invested in the startup than ever before, but on the other, the idea of collaborating with Elon Musk, someone who had revolutionized multiple industries, was incredibly tempting. "I appreciate the offer," Max said cautiously, "but we've made so much progress with the startup. I don't want to leave them behind." Elon paused for a moment. "I understand, but think about what we could achieve together. You have the vision, and I have the resources. We could make this product a game changer." Max felt a pang of doubt in his chest. Could he really turn this down again? He had already chosen his path once, but now he was faced with the possibility of working alongside one of the most influential people in the world. "I'll think about it," Max said finally, hanging up the phone. He sat in silence for a long time, grappling with the decision that seemed to grow more complicated with each passing second. The weight of it all pressed on his shoulders, but something in Max told him he had to stay the course. The startup was his creation, and the vision he had for it was too important to give up on now. The next few days were a whirlwind. Max's team continued to push forward with the refinement of the prototype, working tirelessly to make it ready for manufacturing. They faced setback after setback, but each failure only brought them closer to a solution. Max had learned that success wasn't about avoiding failure. It was about learning from it and persisting despite it. One afternoon, as Max was leaving the office, he received a message from his mentor, Mr. McAllister. "Max, I know you've been wrestling with the decision about Elon. But remember, the hardest part isn't choosing between the two. It's staying true to what you've built. Trust your instincts." Max smiled at the words of wisdom. It was the reminder he needed. He had always believed in the power of his own vision, and nothing had changed. The startup was his passion, and he couldn't let the allure of fame or fortune sway him from what he truly believed in. That night, Max sat down and wrote an email to Elon Musk. "Thank you for the kind offer, Mr. Musk. I've given it a lot of thought, and while I respect the opportunity you've presented, I've decided to continue focusing on my work with the startup. This is where I feel I can make the biggest impact, and I'm committed to seeing it through. I hope our paths cross again in the future." He hit send, and with that, the decision was made. Max had chosen the path that felt right for him, the path that aligned with his own vision and values. But even as Max walked away from Elon's offer for the second time, he couldn't shake the feeling that the future held something even greater. This was only the beginning. Max's decision to stay with the startup and reject Elon Musk's offer had given him a sense of confidence and clarity. The road ahead was still challenging, but he felt more equipped to navigate it. The team was growing, the prototype was improving, and their network of investors and supporters was expanding. It felt like they were finally building momentum. But success often attracts more than just attention. It also brings competition. Max had always known that the world of tech and innovation was cutthroat, but he hadn't anticipated just how fierce the competition would become. One morning, as Max and his team gathered around the conference table for their weekly update, a new reality began to set in. The startup was no longer the only player in the game. An email had just come through from an industry insider, alerting Max that a large corporation had begun working on a very similar solar charging project. The timing was uncanny. The company had the resources to outpace any startup, and they had already been in talks with some of the investors Max had been courting. "This could be a problem," Max muttered, scanning through the email. He knew the company well. It was a tech giant, and they had a reputation for aggressively entering markets and outspending the competition. If they were moving in on his territory, it could spell disaster for the startup. He sat back in his chair, rubbing his eyes in frustration. Just when everything seemed to be going right, the competition had started to rear its ugly head. He had hoped to stay under the radar a little longer, but now it seemed like the race was on. "How serious is this?" asked Emma, the head of product development. She had a look of concern on her face, but Max could see the determination behind her eyes. She wasn't going to back down without a fight. Max exhaled slowly. "They have the money, the resources, and the infrastructure to make this happen quickly. They could be out on the market before we know it. But we've got something they don't," Emma said. "We've got the passion and the drive. They may have the resources, but we have the vision." Max nodded. That was the one thing they couldn't replicate, their team's dedication and their belief in the product. But he knew that passion alone wouldn't be enough to win this fight. They would have to innovate faster, work harder, and find a way to stand out in an industry that was suddenly getting crowded. For the next several weeks, Max and his team pushed forward with renewed urgency. The pressure to succeed grew exponentially as the tech giant began to make its presence felt. The media started to buzz with rumors of their progress, and investors began questioning whether the startup could really compete with a company of that scale. Max spent sleepless nights working on refining the design of the solar charger. He had already come up with an idea to make their version more efficient, but it would take a lot of time and resources to implement. The team was stretched thin, and Max felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. Every decision seemed critical. One wrong move, and they could lose everything they had worked for. At the same time, the pressure from investors mounted. A few had started to express concerns about the startup's ability to stay competitive. They wanted assurances, results, and a clear path forward. The stress of managing these expectations was beginning to take its toll on Max. One evening, after another exhausting day, Max took a walk outside to clear his head. As he walked through the park near the office, he couldn't help but feel the weight of everything that was at stake. The pressure from investors, the looming threat of the tech giant, and his own desire to prove himself were all pulling him in different directions. As he sat down on a bench, he pulled out his phone and checked his messages. There was one from Mr. McAllister that caught his eye. "You're facing a storm right now, Max, but storms don't last forever. Keep pushing and trust your instincts. You know what you're capable of." Max stared at the message for a moment, absorbing the words. It was the encouragement he needed at that moment. Mr. McAllister had been his mentor through every setback and every success. The old man's wisdom had always guided him, and now it was just what he needed to hear. Max took a deep breath and stood up. The storm wasn't going to break on its own. It was up to him to steer the ship through it. He wasn't about to let the competition, or anything else, stand in the way of his vision. When he returned to the office the next morning, Max called an emergency meeting with the team. They needed to act quickly, and he was determined to give them the motivation they needed to overcome the obstacles in front of them. "We're in a fight for our lives right now," Max began. "But I know what we're capable of. We've already proven that we can create something innovative. Now, we need to double down and make it better. We're not going to let a tech giant take what's ours. This is our moment." The team rallied around him, their resolve hardening. They were in this together, and they weren't going to let anyone take their dreams away. Max had no illusion that the road ahead would be easy. But as the sun set on another day of intense work, he felt a surge of determination. He had chosen this path, and he would see it through, no matter what. Max's team was working around the clock, pouring everything they had into making the solar charger stand out. They were relentless in their pursuit of perfection, determined not to let the looming threat of the tech giant take away what they had built. But despite their efforts, the pressure was mounting. The tech giant's product was almost ready for launch, and every day brought new reports of their progress. Just when Max thought things couldn't get any harder, an unexpected message changed everything. It came late one evening, just as Max was about to leave the office. It was from a name he didn't recognize. "Max, I think we need to talk." Curious and cautious, Max opened the message. It was brief, but intriguing. "I have some information that could help your startup compete. Meet me tomorrow at noon, at the cafe on 5th. Max wasn't sure what to think. The message was cryptic, and there were no details about who the sender was or what they had to offer. He hesitated for a moment, but then decided to take the chance. He had nothing to lose and everything to gain. The next day, Max arrived at the cafe promptly at noon, scanning the room for anyone who might be waiting for him. He spotted a man sitting at a corner table, looking somewhat out of place in a sharp suit among the casual crowd. His posture was confident, but there was an air of mystery about him. Max walked over. "You must be Max," the man said, offering a firm handshake. "I'm David Warren. I know you're under a lot of pressure right now, but I think I can help." Max raised an eyebrow. "Help? How?" David smiled, his eyes glinting with an almost unsettling confidence. "I work for one of the largest venture capital firms in the world, and I've been following your startup. I think you've got something special here, but you're about to get buried by the competition. I can't promise you that I can stop them, but I can give you the resources you need to level the playing field." Max sat down, intrigued but cautious. "What are you offering exactly?" David leaned in, his voice lowering. "We have access to cutting-edge technology, connections with industry leaders, and more money than you could ever imagine. We can get your product to market faster, refine it to be better than anything the tech giant has, and ensure that your startup gets the recognition it deserves. All we need in return is a small share of your company." A partnership? Max's mind was racing. It sounded too good to be true. But the more David spoke, the more it became clear that this wasn't just an offer. It was a lifeline. Max had already rejected Elon Musk's offer, and now, here was another chance. But this time, it seemed like it could work in his favor. "I'm listening," Max said, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts in his head. David continued, explaining how his firm had been watching the rise of Max's startup for months. They believed in its potential, and they had the power to push it into the big leagues. The tech giant might have the resources, but with the right guidance and the right connections, they could outmaneuver them. It was an opportunity that Max knew he couldn't afford to pass up. The terms were simple. David's firm would provide the necessary investment and technological expertise to get the solar charger into production faster, with a guarantee that the product would be more efficient and market-ready than anything on the horizon. In return, they would take a minority stake in the company, ensuring that Max retained control but had the support he needed to succeed. Max spent the next few hours weighing the offer. He had always prided himself on the independence of his startup, but he knew the reality. If they didn't act fast, they'd be swallowed up by the competition. This could be the game-changer they needed. By the end of the meeting, Max had made up his mind. "I'm in," he said, shaking David's hand. "Let's do this." The next few days were a whirlwind. David's firm immediately began working with Max and his team, providing resources that were once unimaginable. They brought in top engineers and experts who helped improve the solar charger's efficiency, making it even more powerful and sustainable than before. They also connected Max with some of the biggest names in the industry, who were now eager to collaborate. With this new partnership, the startup's trajectory changed almost overnight. Max's team worked harder than ever, driven by the support and tools they now had at their disposal. They were no longer just a small startup fighting against a tech giant. They were a force to be reckoned with. But even as everything seemed to be falling into place, Max knew that there were still many obstacles ahead. The tech giant wasn't going to sit back and watch them succeed. In fact, they were growing more aggressive by the day. Max felt the pressure mounting again. But this time, he wasn't facing it alone. With the new venture capital backing and an improved solar charger design, Max felt a surge of optimism. His startup had entered a new phase, one that promised to not only compete, but to potentially dominate the market. Every day, the team felt more confident in their product, and the partnership with David Warren's firm brought an air of legitimacy that was hard to ignore. They were no longer an underdog. They were a contender. But in the world of high-stakes business, success often comes with a price. The tech giant that Max had been worried about wasn't about to let his startup rise without a fight. It started subtly. Max received an email late one night from one of his most trusted engineers, Tom, who had been working on the final touches of their solar charger's prototype. "Max, I found something strange," the email read. "The design files for the solar charger, some of them are altered. It looks like someone's been tampering with our code." Max's heart sank. He quickly called Tom to get more details, and as the conversation unfolded, it became clear that someone had not only accessed their development files, but had also made significant changes that could potentially compromise the charger's performance. "Are you sure this wasn't a mistake?" Max asked, his voice thick with concern. "I checked everything," Tom replied, his tone sharp. "Someone deliberately altered the algorithms in a way that would cause our efficiency to drop by about 20%. It's not a glitch, Max. This is sabotage." Max felt a cold rush of fear flood his veins. Who would do this? And more importantly, how did they get access to their files? The only logical explanation was that someone close to the team was involved. But who could it be? Could it be someone working for the venture capital firm? Or worse, someone within his own company? Max spent the rest of the night poring over every detail, trying to track down the source of the breach. He contacted David Warren, explaining the situation, and the two of them agreed that they needed to take immediate action. "Don't worry, Max. We'll find out who did this and make sure they pay," David assured him over the phone. "But right now, your priority needs to be getting the prototype back on track." Max spent the next several days immersed in damage control. He and his team worked tirelessly to restore the integrity of their design, racing against the clock. The sabotage had set them back at least a week, but they were determined to push through. As the days went on, Max's paranoia grew. Who could have done this? Was it an inside job? He trusted his team, but now, even the most familiar faces seemed suspect. Every conversation felt loaded. Every glance exchanged in the office felt like a potential clue. But then, just as things seemed to calm down, the first public blow came. Max was sitting in his office, reviewing the latest design specs, when his phone buzzed. It was a notification from a news outlet featuring an article with the headline, "The Solar Startup's Shocking Fail: How One Team's Promising Product Was Doomed from the Start." Max clicked on the article in disbelief. The piece was a hatchet job. It claimed that the startup's solar charger was riddled with technical flaws that had been discovered during independent testing. The article also questioned the startup's ability to meet its promises, insinuating that they were now too far behind the competition to catch up. The author of the article was an industry journalist known for their ties to big tech companies. The piece was clearly designed to undermine Max's startup, and it was no coincidence that it was published just as the tech giant was about to unveil their own solar product. Max clenched his fists, his mind racing. This wasn't just a typical media hit job. This was a coordinated attack, designed to discredit them and make it easier for the tech giant to swoop in and take control of the market. "Damn it," Max muttered, slamming his fist against the desk. "They're playing dirty." He immediately called David to discuss the situation. "They're trying to bury us before we even get started," Max said, frustration lacing his words. David's voice was calm but firm. "I know. It's a tactic that's been used for years. If we let it go unanswered, it will hurt your credibility. But if we respond, we risk drawing more attention to the issue." Max paced the room, running his hand through his hair. "What do we do? We can't just ignore this." David paused for a moment, and then spoke with the confidence of someone who had been through these kinds of battles before. "You need to respond, but not with words. With action. Get the real story out there. Let your product speak for itself." Max knew what David was suggesting. It wasn't enough to just refute the claims. They needed to prove that their solar charger worked better than anything the competition had. And the only way to do that was with a live demonstration, one that would show the world just how superior their product was. Max immediately began making plans for a public demo, inviting media outlets, investors, and industry leaders to witness firsthand what his startup was capable of. The team would work day and night to prepare, making sure that every detail was flawless. But Max knew that even with the best demonstration, the stakes were higher than ever. If this backfired, it could be the end of the road for the startup. The pressure was mounting, and Max felt the weight of every decision he made. One thing was certain. This battle wasn't just about innovation anymore. It was about survival. Max barely slept in the days leading up to the live demonstration. His team worked tirelessly, tweaking and refining the solar charger, ensuring that everything was perfect for the big event. It was their last chance to show the world that they weren't just another failed startup. They were the future of sustainable energy. The pressure was unimaginable. The media storm from the recent smear campaign had only made things more difficult. Every outlet that covered the industry was now scrutinizing every move Max's company made, waiting for any sign of weakness or failure. But Max couldn't afford to back down now. He had to prove the doubters wrong, show that his team could not only compete with the tech giant but surpass them. The event was scheduled for midday at an upscale conference center, a place where industry giants often held their own press events. It was a bold choice. Max wasn't just going to show up with a product. He was going to make a statement. On the morning of the demonstration, Max stood in front of the large windows of the conference center, looking out at the bustling city below. His reflection in the glass stared back at him, a mix of anxiety and determination. This was it, the moment that could define everything. His phone buzzed, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was David Warren. "Max, I know this is huge, but you've got this. Don't let the pressure break you," David's calm voice said through the phone. Max let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "I'm not worried about the tech. We've perfected the product. But this feels like a fight for our lives, David. If we fail today, it's over." David's tone shifted slightly, a rare note of urgency in his voice. "Failure's not an option. The demo has to be flawless. I'll be there to support you, but you have to remember one thing. Your team believes in you. They followed you this far. Now you have to lead them to victory." Max nodded, taking in David's words. He knew that this was as much about leadership as it was about the product. His team had worked harder than he ever could have imagined, and now it was time to show the world why they deserved to be recognized. At noon, the conference center was packed with journalists, investors, and tech industry insiders, all eager to see if Max's startup could live up to the hype, or if it was destined to fail. Max stood backstage, his team gathered around him, ready for the live demonstration to begin. The tension in the room was palpable. He could hear the buzz of conversations, the murmurs of skepticism as people wondered if they were about to witness a breakthrough or a disaster. Max stepped onto the stage, his heart pounding. He looked out at the crowd, trying to steady his nerves. He couldn't afford to show any fear. "Thank you all for being here today," Max began, his voice clear and confident. "Today, we're not just unveiling a product, we're unveiling the future of sustainable energy. Our solar charger isn't just efficient, it's revolutionary, and we're here to prove it to you." He motioned to the large screen behind him, which displayed a live feed of the solar charger as it powered up. Max glanced over at his chief engineer, Tom, who gave him an encouraging nod. Everything was ready. With a click of a button, the screen showed the solar charger in action. The audience watched intently as the charger began to power multiple devices simultaneously, efficiently converting solar energy into usable power. The devices ranged from smartphones to laptops, all powered by the solar charger without any signs of lag or failure. The charger performed flawlessly. Max took a deep breath and continued. "This isn't just another solar product. This is an energy solution that's built to last, to scale, and to make a real difference in the world. No gimmicks, no empty promises." For the next 10 minutes, Max and his team walked the audience through the technology behind the solar charger, explaining the breakthroughs that made it possible. As they demonstrated its capabilities, the crowd grew more and more impressed. The product was working better than even Max had expected, and it was clear that it was in a league of its own. But Max wasn't done yet. He had one more trick up his sleeve, one final move to drive the point home. As he wrapped up the demonstration, he turned to the audience with a grin. "We're not just here to talk. We're here to prove our product's potential. In front of all of you, we've set up a live test. I've arranged for this charger to power a complete off-grid station capable of sustaining an entire household's power needs. It's a big leap, but we believe in our technology." With a few more presses of a button, the large screen displayed a live feed of a remote off-grid cabin, an isolated location where the solar charger was now providing power to the entire structure. The lights flickered on, the stove powered up, and even the heating system came to life, all using nothing but solar energy. Max's heart raced as the crowd gasped in awe. The tech giant had nothing that could match this kind of performance. He could see it in the faces of the people watching. This wasn't just a demo. It was a game changer. The moment the demo concluded, the room erupted into applause. Max felt a wave of relief wash over him. For the first time in weeks, the pressure seemed to lift. They had done it. But just as the crowd began to disperse, Max's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a notification from the news outlet that had published the hit piece. There was a new article. Max clicked on it, his stomach dropping as he read the headline. "Is the solar revolution over? The truth behind the fake demo." The article was filled with claims that the live demonstration had been staged, that the off-grid cabin wasn't really powered by the solar charger. They accused Max's team of faking the results, even calling in anonymous sources to back up their claims. Max gritted his teeth. It was the same playbook. They were trying to tear him down again. But this time, he wasn't going to back down. The sting of the latest smear article was still fresh as Max stared at his phone, frustration building with every word he read. It was the same tactic: undermine the credibility of his team, paint their success as a lie, and use any means necessary to discredit them. This time, however, the stakes were even higher. Max knew that the narrative being spun about his company could potentially undo all the hard work they had done. The hours following the live demonstration had been a blur. Journalists were in a frenzy, some calling to confirm the details of the event, others hoping to catch Max off guard with their leading questions. He handled the inquiries as best as he could, carefully controlling the message while refusing to back down from the challenge. But as the day wore on, it became clear that the battle was no longer just about proving the solar charger's capabilities. It was about survival. Max sat in his office late into the night, reviewing his strategy. He had to do something bold, something that would force the tech giant and the media to stop hiding behind lies and come face to face with the truth. His team had worked tirelessly to develop a product that could change the world, but if they couldn't expose the sabotage, their credibility would remain in question. "Enough is enough," Max muttered to himself as he dialed David's number. David answered immediately. "Max, I know you're pissed. What's the next move? Max leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the glowing screen. I'm done playing defense. We've proven our product works. Now we need to go on the offensive. I'm going to expose everything. David was silent for a moment. Are you sure? This could get ugly. Once you go public with this, there's no turning back. I don't care, Max said, his voice sharp. The world needs to know what they've been trying to do to us. I'm not going to sit back and let them destroy everything we've built. David let out a heavy sigh, then spoke with resolve. All right, Max. Let's take the fight to them. I'll get the legal team involved. We'll make sure everything's airtight. Let's do this. Max hung up the phone, feeling a sense of determination settle over him. He knew this was a dangerous move, but he also knew that if they didn't fight back, they would be crushed under the weight of lies and deceit. It was time to reveal the truth. The next morning, Max called a press conference, a move that would either solidify his company's place in the market or seal its fate. He didn't just want to present the facts. He wanted to expose the tech giant's corruption, the sabotage that had been plaguing his team from the start. As he stood before a sea of journalists, cameras flashing in his face, Max felt the weight of the moment. The entire world was watching, and it was up to him to steer the narrative. Thank you for joining me today, Max began, his voice steady but firm. What I'm about to reveal will shake the foundation of the tech industry, but it's the truth. My team and I have worked tirelessly to bring you a product that's capable of changing the world. But in recent weeks, we've faced sabotage, deliberate attacks on our product and our reputation, by one of the largest tech companies in the world. The room fell silent. Max could feel the eyes of every journalist on him, waiting for what came next. He continued. We've discovered that critical design files for our solar charger were tampered with, that our intellectual property was stolen, and that efforts were made to discredit us through false media reports. But today, we're not just talking about it. We're showing the evidence. With a swipe of his hand, a screen behind him lit up with emails, internal documents, and communications that laid bare the tech giant's efforts to undermine his startup. Max had gathered every piece of evidence, every lead his team had uncovered. The proof was irrefutable. He paused for a moment, allowing the journalists to absorb the gravity of the situation. This is a call to action for every innovator, every entrepreneur, and every person who believes in the power of technology to change the world. What's happening here isn't just an attack on my company. It's an attack on innovation itself. Max's heart pounded in his chest as he spoke, but he held his ground. This was his moment to make the tech giant's underhanded tactics public knowledge. He wasn't just going to win this fight. He was going to expose them for what they truly were. The room erupted in chaos as reporters began firing off questions. But Max stood tall, knowing that no matter what they threw at him, he had already won. He had taken control of the narrative. The press conference was just the beginning. Over the next few days, the fallout from Max's bold move was immediate and explosive. The media that had previously panned his product was now forced to cover the scandal. News outlets across the globe were reporting on the corruption within the tech giant, while Max's startup gained unprecedented attention. But as expected, the tech giant didn't take kindly to being exposed. Their legal team wasted no time in launching a counterattack, filing lawsuits, and denying all allegations. They even released their own version of events, claiming that the solar charger demo was indeed faked, and that Max's team had manipulated the evidence to gain public favor. But the truth had already taken hold. Max's exposé had put the tech giant on the defensive, and now the world was watching. Investors who had been hesitant to back his company were now lining up, eager to get in on a brand that was taking a stand against corporate corruption. Max wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in weeks, he felt a sense of hope. His startup was no longer just fighting for survival. It was fighting for something bigger. It was fighting for the future of innovation. Max knew the storm was coming. The tech giant's legal team had already filed a series of lawsuits, accusing his company of defamation, and they were now rallying their media contacts to fire back at Max's exposé. They weren't going to let him take down the industry leader without a fight, and the PR machines on both sides were now in full gear. Max had thrown the first punch, but now it was time to see if his team could take the hits. The phone call started early the next morning. The first one was from David. Max, the media's already spinning this. They're calling you the David to their Goliath, but they're framing you as the villain. How are you holding up?" David's voice had a steady undercurrent of concern. Max rubbed his eyes, exhausted after another sleepless night. "I knew this would happen. They'll do everything they can to bury us. But we've got the evidence. We've got the truth on our side. They can't keep lying forever." But even as Max said it, a nagging doubt lingered. The media was a powerful force, and as much as he believed in his company's product, he couldn't ignore the weight of the opposition. The tech giant had deep pockets, an army of lawyers, and endless influence. Max's startup had heart, but was it enough? Over the next week, the backlash from the expose was overwhelming. Max's company faced an intense public relations campaign orchestrated by the tech giant. Every day, headlines flooded the news. Max's solar charger is a scam, fake demo exposed, the truth behind Max's lies, and legal battle looms for Max's startup. The lies were relentless, twisting the facts to make it seem as if Max's team had fabricated everything. Even some investors, previously on board with Max's vision, started pulling back, worried that their involvement might bring too much negative attention. Max's team was hit hard as well. Tom, the lead engineer, was fielding calls from investors demanding answers. Sarah, the marketing director, was managing an avalanche of negative press. Max did his best to stay strong, but it was becoming clear that the battle was far from over. The legal threats were escalating, and Max knew it was only a matter of time before they came after him personally. He had no intention of backing down, but the toll it was taking on him was becoming evident. It was late one evening when Max received a message from an anonymous source. It was a single line of text. "They're hiding something bigger. Go deeper." Max stared at the message, his mind racing. Who would send him this? And what was he supposed to make of it? He'd already done everything he could to expose the tech giant's underhanded tactics. But what if there was more? What if the conspiracy was even bigger than he realized? After a few moments of thought, Max made a decision. He had nothing to lose at this point. He needed to find the truth, no matter how dangerous or difficult it was. He reached out to David. "David, I need to dig deeper into the tech giant's operations. Someone just sent me a message. They're telling me there's something bigger going on, something that could blow the lid off everything." David hesitated for a moment before replying. "Max, this is dangerous territory. You know what kind of power these people have. Are you sure you want to go down this path?" Max stood up from his desk, pacing. "We don't have a choice. We've already been fighting for our lives. If there's something bigger at play, we need to expose it. This could be the key to everything." David sighed. "All right, let's dig. But we have to be careful. This could get out of hand very quickly." Max agreed. He had no idea how deep the rabbit hole went, but he knew he had to find out. The next few days were a blur of late-night phone calls, encrypted messages, and secure documents. Max's small but dedicated team worked together to uncover more about the tech giant's dealings. They found inconsistencies in the company's financial records, strange transactions between companies, and connections that seemed too coincidental to be ignored. Max was shocked by what they were uncovering. There were links to offshore accounts, hidden deals, and even evidence of bribery. One night, as Max and Tom pored over the documents, Tom looked up from his laptop, his face pale. "Max, you need to see this. These aren't just irregularities. This looks like an organized effort to suppress innovation. They've been buying up patents from smaller startups for years and burying them. Your company's solar charger? They were trying to buy the patent years ago. When you refused, they started sabotaging you." Max's mind raced. He had suspected the tech giant was ruthless, but this was a whole new level of corruption. It wasn't just about protecting their products. It was about maintaining a monopoly over the entire industry, stifling any competition that might threaten their dominance. "Are you sure?" Max asked, his voice barely a whisper. Tom nodded. "It's all here. They've been trying to shut you down from the start." Max leaned back in his chair, the weight of everything crashing down on him. "We have to take this public. This is bigger than just our demo or the lawsuits. This is about exposing their whole operation." The next day, Max called another press conference. This time, he wasn't just defending his company. He was going on the offensive. As the media gathered, Max stepped up to the podium, his voice calm but full of conviction. "I've told you all the truth before, but now I'm going to tell you the rest. The tech giant you've been hearing about, the one that's been attacking my company, they've been hiding something for years. They've been systematically eliminating competition and suppressing innovation. They're not just a business, they're a monopoly." The room went silent as Max revealed the documents and the evidence they had uncovered. He didn't hold back. "This is the real story. They didn't just try to sabotage our product, they've been doing it to others for years. And they won't stop until they own everything." The response was immediate and overwhelming. The media, once skeptical of Max, now had no choice but to report on the evidence he presented. The tech giant was caught in a scandal that rocked the industry. As Max's exposé spread, the tide began to turn in his favor. Investors who had pulled out started reaching out again. Media outlets that had been attacking him now asked for interviews. Max's company was no longer just a startup. It was a symbol of resistance against corporate corruption. But Max knew this was just the beginning. The fight was far from over, and the tech giant wasn't going to go down without a fight. But for the first time, Max felt like he had the upper hand. The phone rang early the next morning, pulling Max from his restless sleep. His hand fumbled for the receiver, still groggy, as he answered with a weak, "Hello?" It was David. His voice, usually steady, now had an urgency that Max hadn't heard before. "Max, the backlash is even worse than we thought. The tech giant has filed a countersuit, and they've mobilized their top lawyers. They're going for your throat." Max sat up straighter, instantly awake. "How bad is it?" "They're accusing you of hacking into their systems to steal the patents," David said, each word a blow to Max's chest. "They're framing this as a criminal case, not just corporate sabotage. If they get the right judges, this could get real ugly, real fast." Max's mind raced. He knew this was coming. The tech giant wasn't just going to roll over. They were going to fight tooth and nail. But this accusation, hacking, it was a whole new level of danger. If they could convince the courts he was guilty of something illegal, it could ruin everything. He took a deep breath, his fingers tightening around the phone. "What do we do?" David paused for a moment before replying, "We fight back. We go on the offensive. We've got the truth, Max. And we've got the public's eye. Now, we need to turn that into leverage." The next day, Max called another press conference. This time, he wasn't just defending his company. He was going on the offensive. As the media gathered, Max stepped up to the podium, his voice calm but full of conviction. "I've told you all the truth before, but now I'm going to tell you the rest. The tech giant you've been hearing about, the one that's been attacking my company, they've been hiding something for years. They've been systematically eliminating competition and suppressing innovation. They're not just a business, they're a monopoly." The room went silent as Max revealed the documents and the evidence they had uncovered. He didn't hold back. "This is the real story. They didn't just try to sabotage our product, they've been doing it to others for years. And they won't stop until they own everything." The response was immediate and overwhelming. The media, once skeptical of Max, now had no choice but to report on the evidence he presented. The tech giant was caught in a scandal that rocked the industry. As Max's exposé spread, the tide began to turn in his favor. Investors who had pulled out started reaching out again. Media outlets that had been attacking him now asked for interviews. Max's company was no longer just a startup. It was a symbol of resistance against corporate corruption. But Max knew this was just the beginning. The fight was far from over, and the tech giant wasn't going to go down without a fight. But for the first time, Max felt like he had the upper hand. The phone rang early the next morning, pulling Max from his restless sleep. His hand fumbled for the receiver, still groggy, as he answered with a weak, "Hello?" It was David. His voice, usually steady, now had an urgency that Max hadn't heard before. "Max, the backlash is even worse than we thought. The tech giant has filed a countersuit, and they've mobilized their top lawyers. They're going for your throat." Max sat up straighter, instantly awake. "How bad is it?" "They're accusing you of hacking into their systems to steal the patents," David said, each word a blow to Max's chest. "They're framing this as a criminal case, not just corporate sabotage. If they get the right judges, this could get real ugly, real fast." Max's mind raced. He knew this was coming. The tech giant wasn't just going to roll over. They were going to fight tooth and nail. But this accusation, hacking, it was a whole new level of danger. If they could convince the courts he was guilty of something illegal, it could ruin everything. He took a deep breath, his fingers tightening around the phone. What do we do? David paused for a moment before replying, We fight back. We go on the offensive. We've got the truth, Max. And we've got the public's eye. Now, we need to turn that into leverage. Max nodded, determination burning in his gut. This wasn't just about defending his company anymore. This was about exposing the corrupt practices that had been festering in the tech industry for years. He wasn't going to back down now. That afternoon, Max and his team gathered in the conference room, the atmosphere tense as they reviewed the legal documents. Sarah, the marketing director, had already put together a strategy to handle the PR fallout. Tom, the lead engineer, was double-checking their evidence, making sure everything was airtight. But Max knew the real battle was going to be in the courtroom. David's right, Max said, pacing the room. We've got to turn the narrative around. We can't just defend ourselves. We need to expose the truth even more. We can't let them frame us as criminals. This is a fight for our future. Tom looked up from his laptop, his face serious. But if they're accusing us of hacking, we're going to need some serious proof to counter that. They're not going to take this lightly. Max stopped pacing, meeting Tom's gaze. I know, but they've been hiding this stuff for years. We need to dig deeper, even if it means taking some risks. We can't let them bury us. As the days passed, Max and his team worked tirelessly to build their defense. They reached out to cybersecurity experts to refute the hacking claims, and they contacted former employees of the tech giant who might be willing to speak out. Every corner they turned, they found more evidence of the tech giant's corrupt practices, but it wasn't enough yet. Then, one afternoon, Max received a tip from an unexpected source. It was a former intern who had worked at the tech giant's headquarters years ago. The intern had left the company after uncovering something strange, an illegal deal between the tech giant and a government contractor, something that could implicate the company in more than just corporate sabotage. Max arranged to meet the intern in a quiet cafe. He sat at a corner table, his heart racing with anticipation as the intern walked in, glancing around nervously before taking a seat across from him. Thanks for meeting me, Max said, trying to hide his excitement. What did you find? The intern lowered his voice, glancing around again. I don't know all the details, but there was something off about the way they handled their patents. They were buying up patents from smaller startups and then making sure no one else could get them. But that wasn't the worst part. They had a deal with a government contractor to suppress certain technologies. They were burying innovations that could have changed everything. And when I tried to report it, they covered it up. Max sat back, shocked. This was the break he had been waiting for. The tech giant had been using its power not just to crush competition, but to actively stop progress in its tracks. It was worse than he had imagined. Do you have proof? Max asked, leaning forward. The intern nodded. I've got documents, contracts, emails. It's all there. With this new evidence in hand, Max knew it was time to take the next step. He called David immediately, explaining what he had learned. This is it. This is what we need. We've got proof that they've been stopping innovation on purpose. This is bigger than anything we've uncovered so far. David's voice was filled with relief. That's the smoking gun. If we can get this to the right people, this could blow the lid off everything. But Max, we have to be careful. If they find out we've got this, they'll do anything to stop us. Max's mind was already racing. We can't let them win. We go public with this. We make sure the world knows what they've been doing. The next few days were a blur of frantic preparations. Max's team worked around the clock to verify the authenticity of the documents, while David began contacting journalists who could help get the story out. Max knew the risk, but he also knew that this was the moment that could change everything. He was no longer just a small startup founder fighting to survive. He was a whistleblower, about to expose one of the biggest corporate conspiracies in history. On the morning of the press conference, Max stood in front of the cameras once again, but this time, there was a sense of finality in his voice. He wasn't just defending his company anymore. He was fighting for the future of innovation itself. I've told you the truth before, but now I'm going to tell you something even bigger, Max began. his voice calm but powerful. The tech giant has been hiding something. They've been suppressing innovation, making deals to eliminate competition, and stopping new technologies from reaching the market. And now, I'm going to show you the proof. As Max unveiled the documents and shared the full story, the room fell silent. This wasn't just a corporate fight anymore. This was about the very future of the tech industry. The fallout from Max's press conference was immediate, and it hit hard. The story exploded across social media, tech blogs, and even mainstream news outlets. Everywhere Max turned, people were talking about the corruption within the tech giant, and his brave move to expose it all. The documents, which showed the company's suppression of innovative technologies, were being scrutinized by experts, and so far, they checked out. But with all the attention came even more pressure. Max's phone rang off the hook. Investigative journalists wanted interviews, and people from all corners of the tech industry were reaching out. Some offered their support, while others questioned his motives, calling him reckless. But what stung the most was the legal threats that came pouring in. The tech giant wasn't going to go down quietly. They were preparing their own counterattack, accusing Max of defamation, theft of intellectual property, and even espionage. They had the power to crush him, but Max wasn't backing down. He sat at his desk, the weight of the battle ahead hanging heavily on his shoulders. Beside him, his legal team worked around the clock, formulating a defense strategy. But even they could sense the uphill battle they were facing. "Max, we need to prepare for the worst," David said, his tone serious as he looked over the latest batch of legal threats. "They're not just playing dirty, they're going for your jugular. We need to make sure we're not just reacting to them, but also staying ahead." Max nodded, feeling the pressure building. The whole world was watching. If he lost now, not only would his company be in jeopardy, but the damage to his reputation could be irreparable. But he wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for every entrepreneur, innovator, and dreamer who had ever been crushed by a bigger, more powerful corporation. This was his chance to make a real difference. Later that day, Max met with Tom and Sarah to discuss the next phase of their plan. They needed to fight back, and it had to be strategic. "We've got the truth on our side," Max said, pacing the room. "But we can't just keep throwing out the evidence. We need to use it to shake their foundation. We need to expose the deep corruption inside their company, the ones that no one has ever dared to touch before." Sarah, who had been quiet up until that point, spoke up. "Max, we need to stay focused. This isn't just about fighting the tech giant anymore. It's about showing the world that this isn't a fight between one company and another. This is about the future of innovation. If we can get people to see that, they'll rally behind us." Tom added, "We also need to be careful. The more aggressive we get, the harder they'll push back. It's not just legal battles we're facing now, it's public perception. If we look too reckless, people might start questioning whether we're the bad guys." Max took a deep breath, considering their words. He knew the stakes. He couldn't afford to alienate the very people who had been supporting him, but he also couldn't back down now. The truth needed to come out, no matter the cost. "I get it," he said, looking at both of them. "We've got to strike a balance. We need to show the world that we're not just fighting for ourselves, we're fighting for something bigger, something worth believing in." The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal challenges and media appearances. The tech giant was doing everything in their power to discredit Max, but the more they tried to tear him down, the more they inadvertently drew attention to their own dirty laundry. Max's team kept releasing more evidence, each piece more damning than the last. But with each revelation came a fresh wave of retaliation from the tech giant's legal team. Then, just when things couldn't seem more overwhelming, Max received an unexpected visitor. Elon Musk. Max's heart skipped a beat when he saw the familiar face enter his office. The tech mogul, known for his ventures in space, electric cars, and AI, was standing in front of him, a look of serious determination in his eyes. "Elon," Max said, standing up to shake his hand, "what brings you here?" Elon sat down, his gaze never leaving Max. "I've been following your fight. It's impressive, to say the least, and I think you're onto something huge. But you're also going to need more than just evidence. You need power, and I have a little bit of that." Max blinked, trying to process what Elon was implying. "What are you talking about?" Elon leaned forward. I want to help. I've seen the way these giants operate. They don't just destroy companies, they stifle progress. And if you're willing to work with me, we can hit them where it hurts. Together, we can make sure the truth gets out, and they won't be able to sweep it under the rug anymore. Max's mind raced. This was the kind of help he needed, the kind of backing that could change the entire course of the battle. But it wasn't just about the power Elon brought. It was about what it meant. This wasn't just about fighting one corporation anymore. This was a battle for the very future of technology and innovation. I'll do whatever it takes, Max said, his voice resolute. I've already lost so much, but I can't back down now. This is bigger than all of us. Elon smiled, a glint of approval in his eyes. I knew you'd say that. Let's take the fight to them, Max. We're going to change the world. As the alliance between Max and Elon Musk took shape, the next phase of their strategy began to unfold. Together, they would not only expose the corruption within the tech giant, but also disrupt the entire tech landscape. They had the truth on their side, and now, with Elon's support, they had the power to ensure the world saw it. But even as they geared up for the next battle, Max knew the war wasn't over. There was still so much to lose, so much at stake. But for the first time in weeks, he felt a spark of hope, a sense that, just maybe, they could win this fight. Max barely slept that night. The weight of what had just happened, Elon Musk, the man who had revolutionized multiple industries, offering to help him take on one of the most powerful tech giants in the world, felt surreal. His mind raced with possibilities, strategies, and consequences. He was no longer just a young entrepreneur fighting for his startup's survival. He was now part of something far bigger. Elon had always been a figure of admiration for Max, but now they were allies. The implications of that still hadn't fully sunk in. Could their partnership actually turn the tide of the battle? Could they really change the tech world forever? Max wasn't sure, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just about winning a legal case anymore. This was about challenging the very system that had enabled corporations like the tech giant to manipulate the market and stifle innovation. The next morning, Max sat down with his team to plan the next move. The pressure was mounting. The court battles were intensifying, and public opinion was split. Some saw Max as a hero, an underdog standing up to a bully. Others saw him as a naive disruptor who had bitten off more than he could chew. But with Elon's backing, he had a chance to tip the scales in his favor. Elon's got the resources to help us in ways we never could on our own, Max said, standing in front of the team. We need to think big. We can't just expose the corruption anymore. We need to dismantle their entire operation. We need to take them down in a way that leaves no doubt about who the real criminals are. David, the lead attorney, raised an eyebrow. You're suggesting something beyond just the legal fight? Something more aggressive? Max nodded. Yes. We're going to use everything we have, public opinion, media, technology, and now, Elon's influence. We need to make sure the world knows that this isn't just a legal battle. This is a fight for the future of innovation, for the right to dream and build without being crushed by monopolies. Sarah, the marketing director, stepped forward, her face serious. Max, if we go that route, we risk becoming as ruthless as they are. We've got to keep our message clear. We're fighting for the truth, not just to win. Max appreciated Sarah's perspective. She was always the voice of reason in their group. I know. We won't sacrifice our principles, but we need to be smart. We need to show the world that we're not just reacting. We're driving the change. We're pushing the boundaries of what's possible, and we're doing it together. Over the next few days, the pace of their preparations picked up. Elon's team began working with Max's legal and PR teams, helping them navigate the intricacies of the media landscape. They strategized on how to maximize the impact of their next move. A coordinated global campaign aimed at exposing the tech giant's corruption and manipulating the narrative to their advantage. But it wasn't just about the media anymore. With Elon's backing, Max had access to powerful tools, technological expertise, resources, and contacts that could disrupt the very foundation of the tech giant's empire. One evening, Elon invited Max and his team to SpaceX headquarters to meet with some of his top engineers and tech experts. The state-of-the-art facility was awe-inspiring, a testament to Elon's vision for the future. As they sat around a large conference table, Elon laid out his plan. "We've got the tech," Elon said, his voice steady. "But to take down a company like this, we need to hit them where it hurts. Their supply chains, their patents, their very infrastructure. We've been working on some AI-driven tools that can expose their shady dealings. It's time we turn their own system against them." Max felt a surge of excitement mixed with anxiety. This was it. This was the kind of weaponry they needed to make an impact. As the weeks passed, the media campaign went into full swing. Max appeared on high-profile talk shows, speaking passionately about the importance of innovation and transparency in the tech world. Elon, too, lent his voice, backing Max publicly and highlighting the dangers of monopolistic control over emerging technologies. Their partnership had become a symbol of resistance, and the public response was overwhelming. Supporters rallied behind Max, sharing his message and pushing for accountability. But as much as the public seemed to be on their side, the tech giant wasn't going down without a fight. They ramped up their legal efforts, attacking Max's credibility and accusing him of trying to destabilize the industry. They hired top PR firms to discredit him and dug up old tweets, interviews, and public appearances to try to paint him as reckless and untrustworthy. It was a full-on media war. Max was exhausted. Every day felt like a new battle, and the pressure was taking its toll. But whenever he felt like giving up, he remembered why he started this fight in the first place. It wasn't just about his company anymore. It was about something far bigger. Then, one fateful morning, as Max prepared for another round of interviews, he received a call from David. His voice was urgent, and Max could hear the tension in his words. "Max, we've got a situation. The tech giant just launched a counterattack. They're claiming that our evidence was fabricated. They've got new experts who say that the documents we've released are altered. We need to respond, and fast." Max's heart sank. He knew that this was coming. The tech giant had deep pockets and powerful connections. They would do anything to protect their interests. But this time, Max wasn't going to wait for them to strike first. He had to hit back, and he had to do it harder than ever before. "Get the team together," Max said, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside. "We're not backing down now. We're going to make sure the truth is undeniable." Max stared at the screen, his mind racing as the breaking news unfolded before him. The tech giant had just made a shocking move, one that left him momentarily breathless. They weren't just accusing Max of fabricating evidence anymore. No, this time, they had released a full counter-documentary, a slick, well-produced film that turned the narrative on its head. The video painted Max as a disgruntled former employee with a vendetta, accusing him of manipulating data, lying about his past, and fabricating the documents to suit his own agenda. It included interviews with former colleagues, some of whom had worked with him at his company, claiming that Max had always been difficult to work with and had exaggerated his role in certain projects. The narrative was crystal clear. Max wasn't a hero. He was a fraud. Max watched as the video racked up millions of views. The comments section was flooded with mixed reactions. Some people stood by him, but many others were swayed by the polished propaganda. The damage to his reputation was starting to feel real. It was one thing to fight a faceless corporation in the courtroom, but this was personal. They were attacking his character, his very integrity. David called him immediately. "Max, we need to act fast. We can't let this stand." "I know," Max replied, his voice tight. "But how do we fight a media machine that big? They're turning the world against us." David paused, then spoke with quiet determination. "We fight back with the truth. We can't afford to back down now. The only way to overcome this is to turn their lies into our strength." Max thought about it for a moment. They had the evidence, undeniable, ironclad proof of the tech giant's wrongdoings. But the stakes were higher than ever now. They weren't just fighting for the future of their company. They were fighting for their survival. The following days were a whirlwind. Max and his team worked around the clock, devising a counter-strategy. They couldn't just release more evidence. The tech giant had already flooded the media with its version of events. Instead, they needed something bigger, something that would pierce through the lies and leave no room for doubt. That's when Elon stepped in. "We've got the power to expose them for good," Elon said during one of their late-night strategy sessions. "But we need a global stage. We need to make sure the world is watching when the truth comes out. Max's eyes widened. He had been thinking along the same lines, but hearing it from Elon gave him a sense of certainty. You're right. We need to go big. We need to show everyone how deep the corruption runs. Elon smiled. I think it's time we release something they won't see coming. What followed was an audacious move that none of them could have predicted. Elon had arranged for an exclusive interview with Max, broadcast live to millions of viewers across the globe. But this wasn't just any interview. It was an open challenge to the tech giant, an opportunity for Max to expose the full extent of their malfeasance. The night before the broadcast, Max could barely sleep. His mind kept running through the possible outcomes. If this went well, it could turn the tide in their favor. If it failed, if the tech giant managed to twist the narrative once again, it could be the end of everything. But deep down, Max knew he had no choice. The world was watching, and this was his moment to show them the truth. The next evening, Max sat in front of the camera, a spotlight casting his shadow across the set. He was nervous, but there was something else inside him, something deeper. Determination. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about everyone who had ever been crushed by a system that cared more about power than progress. The interview began, and for the first few minutes, it was a typical media appearance. Questions about the ongoing legal battle, the evidence he had released, and the public reaction. But then, with a simple, yet pointed question, the conversation shifted. Max, the host asked, the tech giant has accused you of lying, of fabricating evidence to destroy their reputation. What do you have to say to that? Max looked into the camera, his eyes steady. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for. They're not just attacking me, Max said, his voice calm but resolute. They're attacking the future of innovation. They're attacking every person who has ever dared to challenge the status quo. But here's the truth. They've been hiding their dirty secrets for too long, and it's time for the world to know who they really are. He paused for a moment, letting the weight of his words settle. I've got the proof, the real proof, and tonight, I'm going to show you everything. With a simple gesture, Max handed over a stack of documents to the host. The camera zoomed in as the host flipped through them. These weren't just legal papers. These were internal memos, email chains, and confidential files. Clear, indisputable evidence of corporate corruption, stolen patents, and illegal practices. The documents were damning. The host's eyes widened as he read through them. This is incredible. Max, what does this mean for the future of the tech giant? Max's voice remained steady, though inside, his heart was racing. It means their days are numbered. They've been hiding the truth for far too long. And now, it's time for the world to see what they've been up to. The interview aired live, and within minutes, the media exploded. Social media platforms were flooded with reactions. Some shocked, some outraged, but most were in disbelief. Max had just delivered the kind of blow that the tech giant couldn't ignore. They couldn't spin this. The truth had been laid bare for the world to see. As the night wore on, the pressure on the tech giant intensified. They scrambled to respond, but it was clear that they were losing the battle. Max had gone from being an underdog to a force to be reckoned with. The fight wasn't over, but Max knew that this was the turning point. The truth was out, and there was no going back. The aftermath of the explosive interview hit Max like a freight train. In the days that followed, the tech giant went into full damage control mode. Their legal teams were working overtime, issuing public denials and trying to discredit the authenticity of the evidence Max had exposed. But it didn't matter. The world had already seen the truth. Max's phone rang nonstop with media requests. News outlets, both small and large, clamored to get his side of the story. Social media was a battlefield, with millions of people weighing in, offering support, and sharing their opinions. #JusticeForMax trended globally, with thousands of users demanding accountability from the tech giant. But not everyone was on Max's side. A powerful group of investors, many with close ties to the tech giant, began launching attacks against him. They painted him as a radical and a threat to the stability of the tech industry. They claimed that his actions would only create chaos, and that his vision for innovation was reckless and dangerous. These voices were loud, persistent, and influential. Their words had the power to sway public opinion, and Max knew that this fight wasn't just about the truth anymore. It was about perception. Max spent sleepless nights watching the media spin his story in ways he never expected. The tech giant's PR team was smart. They didn't deny the evidence completely. Instead, they focused on one key point. They questioned Max's motives. Was he truly trying to make the world a better place? Or was this just a personal vendetta, a chance for him to settle old scores? Elon, ever the strategist, knew how to turn this to their advantage. "They're trying to paint you as the villain, Max," Elon said one evening, when Max was feeling particularly overwhelmed. "But we can use that. We can turn the narrative around and make it about what you're really fighting for: innovation, freedom, and a level playing field. We've got the power to shift the conversation. We just need to take control of it." Max nodded, taking a deep breath. Elon was right. The battle had entered a new phase. It wasn't just about facts and evidence anymore. It was about framing the narrative, controlling the story, and making sure the world knew that Max wasn't just a lone wolf fighting against a corporate titan. He was a symbol of something bigger. Max's team quickly mobilized, coordinating a new campaign to shift the focus. Instead of solely defending the evidence, they began emphasizing the larger message, one that resonated with millions of people who were frustrated with the state of the tech industry. They called it #FightForInnovation. The campaign was simple, yet powerful. Max appeared in a series of short, heartfelt videos where he spoke directly to the public. He talked about his upbringing, his passion for technology, and how he had always believed that innovation should be open to everyone, not just the powerful few. He shared stories of other innovators, small startups, and individuals who had been crushed by monopolistic practices. Max's authenticity shone through, and it was clear that his motivation wasn't just about destroying a tech giant. It was about building a fairer, more transparent future for the tech world. Elon, too, lent his voice to the cause. He tweeted relentlessly, emphasizing the need for a new era of technological freedom. He made public statements calling for greater accountability in the industry, and he used his influence to push other key figures to join the cause. But just as the public's support for Max reached a fever pitch, the tech giant struck back harder than ever before. They went after Max's personal life, digging up old financial records and emails from his early days in business. They tried to paint him as a man who had been dishonest in his dealings, suggesting that his current fight was rooted in guilt over past mistakes. Max wasn't prepared for this kind of attack. It cut deeper than anything they had done before. The public's perception of him was still largely in his favor, but the personal attacks were starting to sting. He found himself questioning everything: his motivations, his choices, and whether he was truly prepared for the war he had started. One evening, as Max sat alone in his office, scrolling through the latest barrage of negative press, there was a knock on the door. It was Sarah, his marketing director, looking more serious than usual. "Max, we need to talk," she said, her voice low. "The backlash, it's not just coming from the media anymore. We've got some serious threats, people who want to silence us." Max looked up, startled. "What kind of threats?" "People in high places," Sarah said, taking a seat across from him. "There are investors and corporate figures who are mobilizing to bury this story. They've even started threatening our partners. It's escalating, and if we don't act quickly, it could get worse." Max felt a chill run down his spine. He had known that this fight was dangerous, but hearing it from Sarah made it all too real. He had taken on a tech giant, but now, he was also taking on the powerful people who made the system work. "We have to keep pushing," Max said, his voice firm despite the fear creeping into his chest. "We can't back down now. If we stop, we lose everything." Sarah nodded, but Max could see the concern in her eyes. The stakes were higher than ever, and the fight was far from over. It wasn't just about Max and the tech giant anymore. It was about a battle for the future of innovation, and there were powerful forces trying to silence that message. As the days passed, Max and his team continued to push forward. They strengthened their #FightForInnovation campaign, but now they had to be strategic in how they communicated. They had to be cautious about where they spoke, who they trusted, and how they navigated the increasing threats against them. Meanwhile, the tech giant seemed to grow more desperate by the day. They continued to unleash a torrent of legal challenges and smear campaigns, but the tide of public opinion was shifting. People were beginning to see them for what they were: a corporate behemoth willing to stop at nothing to maintain control. The pressure was mounting, and Max could feel the weight of the world on his shoulders. But one thing had become clear. He wasn't alone in this fight. The world was watching, and it was becoming increasingly clear that the truth was on his side. The media storm surrounding Max was at its peak. The public's support for him seemed unwavering, but behind the scenes, the pressure was beginning to crack the foundation of his campaign. Every day, more investors, more media outlets, and more powerful figures came forward, trying to chip away at the momentum Max had built. The threats, both legal and personal, became more frequent and more aggressive. Max spent sleepless nights in his office, his mind constantly running through the next steps. He couldn't shake the feeling that every move they made was being watched by those who wanted him to fail. It was as if the entire world had turned against him, even as more and more people rallied to his cause. The weight of the truth was heavy, but the battle was wearing him thin. It wasn't just the pressure that was getting to him. It was the fear of what might happen next. The powerful figures behind the tech giant had resources, connections, and influence that Max couldn't even begin to understand. They were willing to go to any lengths to shut him down. One evening, after a particularly draining day of meetings, Max found himself alone in his office. He stared at the screen in front of him, the latest barrage of legal threats flashing across the monitor. His hands trembled as he reached for his phone to check messages. David had sent him a simple text. "They're escalating things. We need to talk." Max knew this wasn't just about business anymore. This was a full-scale war. When David arrived at the office, he didn't mince words. "Max, this is bigger than we thought. We've got more enemies than we realized. Some of them are already trying to take us down from the inside." Max's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, from the inside?" David took a deep breath. "There are people in your company, people we trusted, who are leaking information to the tech giant. It's sabotage, plain and simple. They've been working behind our backs, and we need to find out who." Max felt the world tilt beneath him. The sense of betrayal hit him harder than he expected. These were people he had built his dream with, people he had trusted, and now they were turning on him. "What do we do?" Max asked, his voice quieter than he intended. "We expose them," David said firmly. "We can't let them destroy what we've built. If we catch them in the act, it'll be game over for the tech giant. But we need to act fast." Max and David began a covert investigation into the leaks within their own ranks. They combed through emails, phone records, and internal communications. It was a painstaking process, but the deeper they dug, the more they uncovered. It was clear that the tech giant's reach extended far beyond what Max had ever imagined. As Max sat in the dim light of his office late that night, he felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of despair. The walls were closing in on him. The threats against him and his company had become too real. He could feel the weight of every decision, every move, every risk pressing down on him. Just as he was about to bury his head in his hands, there was a knock at the door. It was Sarah. She looked more concerned than usual, and Max immediately sensed that something was wrong. "Max," she said, her voice tense, "we need to talk. There's something you need to see." Sarah led Max to a back room where their cybersecurity team had been working tirelessly to protect their data. On the screen in front of them was a shocking discovery. Someone within their inner circle had been using encrypted channels to communicate with the tech giant. But what stunned Max even more was the name attached to the messages. It was his brother, Jake. Max's world came crashing down around him. Jake, the one person he had trusted above all others, was the one who had been feeding information to the enemy. Max's heart pounded in his chest as he tried to make sense of it. Why would Jake do this? They had always been close. Jake had always supported him, always believed in his vision. "Are you sure?" Max whispered, his voice barely audible. "We've traced the messages back to him," Sarah said. "It's undeniable." Max's mind reeled. The betrayal felt like a knife twisting in his gut. He had always believed that family was the one thing that could never betray him. But now, his own blood had turned against him. And worse, he was the one who had to confront it. The next few hours were a blur. Max tried calling Jake repeatedly, but his brother wouldn't answer. Max knew that if he wanted answers, he would have to face him in person. Max drove to Jake's apartment, his mind racing with every possible scenario. What could have driven Jake to do this? Was it money, power, or something more personal? Max had no idea, but he had to know the truth. When Max arrived at Jake's place, he stood in front of the door for a long moment before knocking. He was trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. This wasn't just a business deal gone wrong. This was betrayal at the deepest level. Jake opened the door, looking more disheveled than Max had ever seen him. There was no warmth in his eyes, only coldness and a hint of something darker. "Max," Jake said, his voice flat. "I was wondering when you'd come." Max swallowed hard, his voice trembling with emotion. "Why, Jake? Why would you do this to me?" Jake's eyes flickered for a moment, but he didn't speak right away. Finally, he sighed and leaned against the doorframe. "You're not seeing the bigger picture, Max. You're fighting a war you can't win. You've made enemies you don't even know about. And I'm just trying to protect what we have." Max's heart sank. "Protect? You're working with them. You're helping them destroy everything I've built." Jake's face twisted, a bitter smile playing at the corners of his lips. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't about destroying you. It's about saving us. You're in over your head, Max. And now, you're dragging the rest of us down with you." The words hit Max like a slap. His brother wasn't just betraying him for money or power. He was doing it because he believed Max's fight was futile, because he thought Max had gone too far. Max left Jake's apartment in a daze, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. The betrayal cut deeper than any legal battle or smear campaign. This was his family, the people who were supposed to stand by him no matter what. But now, Max knew one thing for certain. He couldn't stop. He couldn't back down. The truth had to come out, no matter the cost. Max didn't sleep that night. His mind kept returning to Jake's words, how he was in over his head, how he was dragging everyone down with him. The sting of betrayal from someone he had trusted so completely was unbearable. It felt like the world was conspiring against him. But despite everything, one thing was clear. He couldn't stop now. Not after everything he had built. The following morning, Max met with David and Sarah. The news of Jake's involvement had shaken him, but he couldn't afford to let his personal life distract him from the war that was already raging. The tech giant was relentless, and they were closing in. David was the first to speak, his voice low and serious. "Max, we've got to assume they're targeting everyone around you now. We need to protect your people, our people. The next move they make could be catastrophic." Max nodded, the weight of the situation settling into his bones. "I know. I'm not just fighting for my company anymore. I'm fighting for everyone who's believed in this." Sarah leaned forward, her expression unwavering. "We need to fight back. We can't just react to their moves. We need to strike first." Max looked at her, considering her words. Striking first wasn't something he had ever wanted to do. He had built everything on the belief that he could do the right thing, that the truth would be enough. But Sarah was right. They couldn't wait any longer. If they wanted to win, they needed to take control of the narrative, to force the tech giant's hand. "We'll need everything we've got," Max said, his voice firm. "All our resources, all our connections. We need to go on the offensive. Let's expose the truth." The next few weeks were a blur of frantic planning, countless meetings, and sleepless nights. Max's team worked tirelessly to gather evidence of the tech giant's shady dealings, illegal contracts, bribery, corporate espionage. They needed more than just rumors. They needed undeniable proof. But the deeper they dug, the more dangerous things became. One afternoon, David burst into Max's office with a folder in hand. "We've got it," he said, his voice triumphant. "This is the smoking gun." Max took the folder, his heart racing as he opened it. Inside was a set of documents that detailed the tech giant's illegal activities, their manipulation of competitors, and even their ties to corrupt government officials. It was everything they needed to take them down. "We've got the evidence," Max said, a fire igniting in his chest. "Now, we need to make it public. We expose them for everything they are." But as they prepared to release the documents, something unexpected happened. Max's phone buzzed, interrupting the tense silence in the room. It was an anonymous message. "We know what you're planning. Release it, and your world will burn. You won't be able to stop us." The architect. Max's heart skipped a beat. The message was clear. Someone knew what they were up to, and they were threatening to destroy everything. Max's instinct screamed that this wasn't just a random threat. This was personal. The architect had to be someone with inside knowledge, someone close enough to know their every move. Who the hell is the architect? David muttered, staring at the screen. Max felt his pulse quicken. He didn't know, but he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just a fight for his company anymore. This was a fight for his life. The team moved into high gear, ramping up their security and accelerating their plans. They couldn't afford to wait any longer. But the pressure was mounting. Max could feel it in the air, a palpable sense of dread that seemed to cling to everything. The threat of exposure was just the beginning. He had made powerful enemies, and now they were circling. Max decided to meet with the media directly. It was time to take the fight public, to make it impossible for the tech giant to silence him. But before he could even make it to the press conference, he received another message from the architect. "I'm not the only one watching you. You won't make it out of this alive if you keep going down this path. This is your last warning." Max clenched his fists. Whoever this architect was, they had made it personal. But Max wasn't going to back down now. He had come too far. As Max took to the stage in front of the cameras, his resolve hardened. The time for fear was over. This was the moment he had been waiting for. The moment he would expose the truth. His voice rang out across the room, steady and unyielding. For too long, this company and others like it have controlled the narrative. They have lied, manipulated, and destroyed lives for the sake of power and greed. But today, I am here to tell you that enough is enough. Today, I will expose the truth that they have been trying to hide. The room fell silent as Max unveiled the documents, his hands steady despite the storm brewing inside him. He watched as the journalists and cameras captured every word, every image. The fight had begun, but as the conference ended and the crowd dispersed, Max received a call that would change everything. It was Jake. "I know you're pissed, Max. I know I betrayed you, but I didn't think it would go this far. I thought I could protect you, protect all of us." Max's heart hammered in his chest. "Jake, this is it. The war's started. There's no going back. You can't just keep pretending to be on the sidelines." "I know," Jake said quietly, "but I can help. I know who's behind this. I know who the architect is." Max's blood ran cold. "Who?" Jake took a deep breath. "It's someone close. Someone you trust." Max's world began to spin as Jake's words settled in. The architect wasn't just an enemy. It was someone in his inner circle, someone he had never suspected. Max stood still, his heart pounding. Jake's voice on the phone seemed to fade, replaced by the racing thoughts in his mind. "Someone close. Someone you trust." The words repeated over and over, drowning out everything else. He knew that Jake wasn't the kind of person to fabricate things, especially not something this serious. Jake had his faults, but Max trusted him. He had trusted him. But now, with the weight of those words hanging in the air, Max felt the ground shift beneath him. "Jake, who are you talking about?" Max asked, his voice cold, composed, though inside, a storm was raging. Jake hesitated, and Max could hear the faint sound of shifting on the other end of the line. The pause lasted longer than Max could bear. Finally, Jake spoke, his words slow and deliberate. "It's David. He's the one behind the architect." Max's stomach dropped. David, the one person who had been his right hand, his most loyal ally, the man who had always been there for him, supporting him through the darkest times. How could it be him? "Are you sure?" Max's voice cracked, betraying the fear and disbelief he was feeling. "This doesn't make sense. He's been with me since the beginning. He's always had my back." "I thought the same thing, Max," Jake replied, his voice strained. "But I've seen the signs. The way he's been moving behind the scenes, setting up meetings with people you don't even know. I've watched him, Max. He's the one pulling the strings. You're not dealing with some corporate machine. David's been orchestrating this from the start." Max couldn't breathe. The walls of his world, the world he had fought so hard to build, began to collapse around him. David was the architect, the one who had been feeding the enemy information, the one who had turned everything into a game of power, manipulation, and control. Why would he do this? Max whispered, his mind racing for answers. I don't know, Jake replied, his voice quieter now. But I'm telling you, you can't trust him anymore. He's the reason you've been getting those threats. He's the one who's been playing both sides. Max hung up the phone, his hands trembling as he tried to process the revelation. David, the man who had been his friend, his partner, his closest confidant, the one he had trusted with his dreams, his ambitions, and his life. And now, it turned out that David was the very force working to destroy him. Max paced back and forth in his office, his mind spinning. He couldn't sit still. His hands clenched into fists, the betrayal coursing through him like a poison. How could he have been so blind? How had he missed the signs? But the truth was undeniable. Everything Jake had said made sense. David had always been a little too eager to make decisions without consulting Max, a little too secretive about the meetings he attended, the people he interacted with. Max had chalked it up to business stress. Now, he knew it was something much darker. He had to confront David. There was no other choice. Max's first instinct was to call David, but he quickly discarded the idea. A phone call wouldn't be enough. He needed to face David in person. He needed to see the truth in his eyes. Later that evening, Max arrived at David's office. The door was closed, but not locked. Max didn't knock. He pushed the door open and stepped inside, his heart hammering in his chest. David was sitting behind his desk, a laptop open in front of him. He didn't look up when Max entered, as if expecting him. That's when Max knew. David had been waiting for this moment. Max, David said smoothly, his voice calm, almost too calm. I was wondering when you would come. Max didn't say anything at first. He simply stared at David, his fists clenched by his sides. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal, it all rose within him, threatening to consume him. You've been working against me this whole time, haven't you? Max said finally, his voice a low growl. David looked up slowly, locking eyes with Max. For a moment, there was no expression on his face, just coldness. Then, he leaned back in his chair and smiled. Max, he said, his voice almost mocking, I'm not working against you. I'm doing what's best for all of us. I'm giving us the power we need to take this to the next level. You've been too caught up in your ideals. I'm not here to play by the rules. I'm here to win. Max's blood ran cold. The man who had been his closest friend, his brother, in a sense, was a liar, a manipulator, someone who had been playing both sides from the beginning. You've been feeding them information. You've been betraying everything I've built, Max spat. You're the architect. You've been pulling the strings this whole time, haven't you? David's smile faltered for a second, but only for a second. Then, he leaned forward, his tone almost patronizing. You think this is about you, don't you? David's voice was calm, almost gentle. You think this is all about your company, your success. But you've been so blinded by your own ambition that you haven't seen the bigger picture. You've been playing checkers while I've been playing chess. I'm doing what's necessary to make sure we come out on top, no matter the cost. Max's mind raced, but the words felt hollow. David's justification didn't matter anymore. There was no redemption for what he had done. He had crossed a line. Why, David? Max asked quietly, his voice barely a whisper. Why did you do this? David's gaze softened for a moment, and Max could see a flicker of something. Guilt, perhaps. But it quickly vanished, replaced by that same cold calculation. You were never going to get there on your own, Max. You were too idealistic. You needed someone who understood how the game was really played. You needed someone who wasn't afraid to get their hands dirty. Max stood frozen, the weight of David's betrayal crashing down on him. This was no longer just a fight for control. This was about his life, his trust, and his future. Max stood in David's office, the space feeling colder by the second. Every word David spoke seemed to sink into Max's mind, pulling him deeper into a dark reality he hadn't fully understood until now. He had trusted David like a brother, and now the man who had stood by his side was the one who had orchestrated the destruction of everything Max had worked for. David was right about one thing. Max had been too idealistic, too focused on doing things the right way. And now, the truth was staring him in the face. If he didn't act decisively, everything could slip away. David leaned back in his chair, his posture casual, as though this confrontation were just another business deal. You're upset, Max. I get it. But this isn't personal. It's about survival. You want to change the world? You have to play the game. And to play it, you need to understand that people like me don't just wait for opportunities. We create them. We make the rules. Max felt a cold sweat break out along his spine. David had been the one person he had believed in the most. The betrayal was a deep cut, one that might never heal. But more than that, the question now wasn't just about trust. It was about his future. Was he willing to let everything go for the sake of one person's vision, a vision that now seemed warped beyond recognition? David's voice cut through his thoughts. We're on the same side, Max. If you would just stop being so naive and join me, we could take over. We could rule this world. I've already set everything in motion. All we need is your full support. You have the power, Max. You just need to stop pretending like this is some kind of moral crusade. Max swallowed hard. His thoughts were a blur, a whirlwind of rage, confusion, and disbelief. But one thing was certain. This was no longer just about a company or even about revenge. This was about control. The control that Max had let slip through his fingers, all because he had trusted the wrong person. The weight of the decision pressed on him like a physical force. Did he keep going down this path with David, knowing the man was nothing but a puppet master pulling all the strings? Or did he sever ties with the very person who had helped him build his empire, facing the unknown consequences of that choice? Max took a deep breath and looked at David. His voice was steady, but his heart pounded in his chest. You're wrong, David. This isn't about playing the game. This is about doing what's right, no matter the cost. And I'm not going to stand by and let you destroy everything I've worked for, everything we've built. You've crossed a line, and now you have to face the consequences. David's expression darkened, but he didn't move. He knew the battle was over before it had even started. Max had made his decision. You don't get it, do you? David said, his voice now laced with anger. You think you can stop me? You think you can take me down just like that? I built this, Max. I've been planning this for years. You don't have the power to take me down. Max met David's gaze, his own resolve hardening. You've already lost, David. The truth is out. The whole world knows who you are now. You've been exposed. David's eyes flashed with something. Maybe panic, maybe fear. But before Max could say anything else, David grabbed his phone, his fingers trembling as he scrolled through messages. He muttered something under his breath, then locked eyes with Max once more. You think you've won, Max? David's voice was barely a whisper now, almost broken. It's never over. You may have the truth on your side, but I have the power. I always have. Max didn't flinch. Power means nothing if you don't have trust. You've lost both. As Max walked out of David's office, his mind was a blur of emotions. The relief of finally facing the truth was tempered by the lingering anger. The betrayal was raw, but Max knew that the worst was still to come. The battle wasn't over. It had only just begun. Max's phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a message from Sarah. We're ready. Time to end this. He paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. The war with David and the tech giant was far from over. But now, Max had the upper hand. He had exposed the truth, and that was something David and his allies couldn't take away from him. Max quickly replied, his fingers steady as he typed, "Let's finish this. Together." In the coming days, the media frenzy escalated as Max and his team released every shred of evidence they had gathered against David and the tech giant. There were lawsuits, investigations, and an outpouring of public support for Max's cause. But amidst all the chaos, one thing became clear. Max had done more than just take down a corporate empire. He had given people hope. The world was watching as Max's story unfolded. His fight wasn't just about business. It was about standing up against corruption, betrayal, and greed. It was about showing that one person, no matter how small, could make a difference. Max had gone from being a victim of betrayal to becoming a symbol of resistance. As the dust settled, Max stood on the balcony of his office, looking out at the skyline. He had won. Not just the battle, but the war. And for the first time in a long time, he felt at peace with the choices he had made. Max's journey has come to an end, but the lessons learned along the way are timeless. What do you think? How do you think Max's story will inspire others to take a stand in their own lives? Share your thoughts in the comments below.